The silence of the dark room is broken by sticky sounds of something being chewed. In a mix of panic and terror, a red-haired man observes something. The horrifying sound of bones breaking and flesh being chewed comes from a woman on the floor, animalistically destroying something. The red-haired man raises his hand to his head, desperate at the scene. That woman was devouring her own newborn child. She growls, showing sharp fangs and stains on her face. Satisfied, she gives a macabre half-smile. It is then revealed that this cruel beast was, until a few minutes ago, the tormented man's wife. The man, dismayed, observes the woman. He clenches his jaw in an expression of hatred, while the careless woman licks her fingers after finishing her dreadful meal. The red-haired man wonders if she has completely lost her mind. He asks himself how a mother could be capable of devouring her own child. She moves to reach for something in front of her. The man is outraged by his wife's cruelty and audacity in devouring their child. The woman's gaze seems lost, and the man tells us that a legend says all women who give birth to direct heirs of that family go mad. He clenches his teeth, overtaken by fury. In thought, a bitter sarcasm echoes within him. He refused to believe that cursed legend could be true. The man's hands begin to tense, transforming into long claws. The woman, perceiving her husband's aura of fury, finally reacts and begins to back away in fear. The man tenses his jaw, showing more of his sharp teeth, and he attacks with his claws. Dominated by hatred, he ends the fate of the woman who once was his wife. As soon as he finishes, he hears footsteps approaching. Theodore was the last person the redhead wanted to see him in that state. Theodore, stunned, stares at his brother, directly asking what he will do now. With a slightly irritated tone, Theodore states that his brother is aware of the problem he has just caused. The redhead listens. Still seized by contained panic, Theodore analyzes with a certain coldness what his brother has just done. The redhead, still kneeling at the crime scene, hears his brother remind him, clearly irritated, that he has just killed a clan member. And not just any member, but his wife and the only daughter of the Yu family. Theodore lowers his gaze as the younger brother screams, claiming it wasn't his fault, that his wife was guilty and that she was the one who went mad. The man pulls out a cigarette. Annoyed by his brother's flimsy excuse, Theodore lights a cigarette, asking him if he really believes he will escape the consequences of his actions with such an excuse. The redhead sits on the floor and touches his head, as if finally pondering the weight of the situation. Smoking, Theodore states that although they belong to a high-ranking clan, the Yu family will not stand still after discovering that their own relative was eliminated. With difficulty, the younger man rises from the ground while the older one stares at him. He approaches his brother and leans his body, letting his head rest on one of his shoulders. Weeping, he calls out his brother's name. Theodore, my brother. He had just lost his newborn child and begs for his brother's mercy. Theodore only responds coldly that he should no longer expect to be treated like a baby. Frightened, the younger man hears his brother order him to quietly go to the steel cage. Surprised by the sentence, he begs his brother again not to send him to the steel cage since, according to his words, it wasn't his fault. Firm in his words, Theodore reminds him that not only is he the older brother, but also the leader of that clan, and he cannot pretend not to see the problematic behavior of a clan member. The younger man becomes agitated, begging his brother to listen to him. Out of patience, Theodore grabs his brother's shirt. With superhuman strength, Theodore lifts his brother by the shirt. The redhead looks at Theodore with anger and worry. Surprised, with trembling hands, he tries to break free. With a harsh throw, Theodore hurls his brother away. He crashes to the ground, making a lot of noise. Dazed, he slowly tries to get up from the floor. He begs for his brother's mercy, but Theodore, fed up, tells him in a threatening tone, "Samuel, I will repeat this only one more time. Go and lock yourself in the iron coffin until further notice." Theodore concludes the command, staring at Samuel with a piercing and domineering look. The scene changes, and a young woman with short black hair thanks someone. A man with gray hair says she doesn't need to be so formal. After all, they are not strangers. She stays silent for a few seconds and then reminds the man that it is already late. Assuring him she will be fine alone, she suggests he go home. The man lets out a small sigh, acquiescing. He notices mentally that there were very few pieces of furniture in the house, disbelieving in the possibility of someone living alone in that house. Worried, he reflects that no one would be capable of living decently there. He remembers that 10 years ago, that house used to be very different. It used to be a beautiful and cozy home, where Jennifer, the black-haired girl, and her parents lived. But shortly after her father's death, her mother became gravely ill for years and then passed away as well, making that home of his brother's family become only a sad ruin. And that Jennifer, his niece who used to be a girl full of life and joy, became only an empty shell without expression, without joy. She extends her hand, noticing a few drops of rain, and reinforces that her uncle should leave, since there will also be traffic. He, in an attempt to comfort her, offers that she come visit him for a few days at his house because he would not like her to be alone. She refuses, but thanks her uncle for the offer. Clasping her hands timidly, she states that that place is her home. He accepts the young woman's words, resigned. He lets out another sigh, apparently sad to leave his niece alone. Turning to leave, he warns that he will come by tomorrow, if not him. Then her aunt will see her, and he says that her mother is in a better place, far from any pain. Jennifer thanks him for his care. The beautiful young woman seems distant in her thoughts, and her gaze is deep and melancholic. A door creaks. She is left alone in the old house after her uncle's departure. Pulling out a cigarette to smoke, the young woman remembers how she hated cold days. Taking a long drag, she relieves the tension, pushing away the thoughts that the cold weather brings bad omens. Turning into ashes, the cigarette continues to burn as she remembers her mother's passing. Jennifer takes another drag, remembering how the rain was similar to her mother's crying. She turns and reflects how maybe the rain is the way her mother expresses anguish for the daughter who did not cry at her funeral. Alone in her house, she sighs and agrees that must be why she hates the rain. The rain falls in long drops on the silent and dark city. Samuel runs breathless while thick drops fall over his face. With stained clothes, he presses his hand against his abdomen. He suddenly stops, panting, reflecting that he knew he would be hunted for not enclosing himself as ordered, but he did not imagine he would have to fight so much to escape. The man's hand slides easily along the brick wall. Determined, he looks around while smacking his lips. Sam hides behind the brick wall while some of his kin pursue him. Two clan members debate where he could be, and one of them claims he is dead meat, since the family leader will not protect him. Hearing the conversation, Sam worries about his situation. The man leaning against the brick wall realizes that his ankle, shoulder, and ribs were broken, and this would make his escape from the clan's thugs very difficult. Almost being caught, Sam notices one of the clan men approaching him. Realizing he had been found, Sam begins to flee. He bursts into a run through the rain, even with the difficulties caused by the wounds on his body. The leather shoes stomp heavily on the wet cement. Samuel makes a long leap away from his captors. He lands on the roof of another building while hearing the shouts of the thugs. The man is stunned, feeling the impact of the fall on his broken bones. Putting pressure on his wounds, he assesses the struggle of trying not to lose strength in that situation. He looks around while searching for a place to rest. The rain falls on the city. Sam mentally seeks a discreet and undetectable refuge, a place with few souls where he might find temporary rest. He then chooses a place. Hearing the clan members in his pursuit, Sam hurries to escape them. The man aims at an open window in the rainy night. He rushes quickly toward it. He throws his body through the window opening, thus shaking off the clan members who were after him. Sam gasps in pain from the broken bones and the impact of the fall. He succumbs to the symptoms of weakness in his body. Despite fighting to stay awake, Samuel begins to faint. The man blacks out completely in a dark room, surrounded by bookshelves and objects. Jennifer wonders, what would be a good dinner for someone living in an empty house? Then she thinks, orange juice and her father's whiskey. She looks at the bottles of liquor, considering it a miracle to have found them. She serves herself some whiskey while smoking a cigarette. She takes a sip of the drink, thinking that this was one of the few things she still enjoyed in life. Alone in her kitchen, she admits that she does not intend to stop smoking and drinking. In a single gulp, Jennifer drinks all the liquor she had in the glass, until she hears something falling, apparently on the second floor of the house. She looks up, finding the sudden noise strange. Looking out the window, she sees the rain in the distance, so it could not be that. Still sitting at the table, she holds a cigarette and ponders what could have fallen upstairs. She remembers the attic of that house, full of books and old boxes, and that it had been about 2 months since she last went up there. Then, she recalls that last year, a bird crashed into the window and ended up not surviving. Struggling due to her drunkenness, Jennifer rises from the kitchen table. Muttering nonsense, the young woman begins to climb the stairs leading to the second floor of the house. The young woman, already drunk, leans and knocks on the door as if expecting someone to answer. Feeling slightly dizzy, she turns the handle of the room. She observes behind a door that opens with a creak. The rain comes through the open window, soaking the attic of the house. Confused, she asks herself when she left the window open. She begins to close the window, relieved that there is no dead animal, wondering when that rain will pass. The window shuts with a discreet click. The young woman notices that there is a strange smell in the environment ever since she closed the window. She looks at the bookshelves, trying to figure out where that odor is coming from. Suddenly, she steps on something sticky. She crouches down to get a better look at what it could be, startled upon seeing the trail of blood on the floor. Ignoring common sense, she follows the trail of drops, trying to find the source of it. Meanwhile, in the shadows, Samuel activates his predator instincts, showing his sharp teeth. With blood-stained claws, he leans on something solid. Paralyzed with fear, Jennifer watches everything without understanding what is in front of her. Suddenly, the figure of a man begins to rise from the floor while the young woman watches him completely stunned. It was not a bird that had crashed into the window, but rather a male figure with threatening eyes and dark hair, far too large to be a cat sheltering from the rain. The man stands, taller than our protagonist, and moves toward her. The scene cuts to a business district of the city. In a corporate building, several men are in a heated discussion. Someone slams a hand hard on a table, stating that the fairest thing would be to eliminate Samuel for what he did to his wife. Mentally exhausted, Theodore listens to it all while massaging his temples, knowing the tremendous headache his brother has caused him. A blonde man casts a curious look at Theodore, while in the background the men still argue about what should be done and what is right and wrong. He smiles and says that Theodore looks quite tired and that this matter seems like it will give him a fine headache. However, while adjusting his tie, Theodore only replies, "Keep quiet, Jim." In a playful tone, Jim comments that if he had married and had a child, he would not need to clean up Sam's messes. Meanwhile, the other men continue discussing the fate of Sam, who took the life of the Yu family heiress. Some want him to pay with his own life, while others counter that he is also from an important family. Wearing a presumptuous smile, Jim states that apparently for these men, it does not matter who has already departed, as long as the family lineage is continued. With a slight smile, Jim adds that regardless of how this stupid meeting ends, the Yu family will still try to take revenge on Samuel. In silence, a man with grayish hair and golden eyes sits at the table. His gaze is evil and piercing as he stares angrily at Theodore. On the other side of the table, Theodore's gaze, lost in his reflections, understands the reason for the Yu family's anger. Still persisting in the conversation, Jim points out that the family will use this opportunity to get rid of Sam, afraid that Theodore might make him his successor. With his inconvenient air, Jim tells Theodore that in case Sam becomes the new head of the family, he would jump out of the clan as quickly as possible. Tired of that conversation, Theodore tells the young man not to speak so hastily, although the blonde man keeps retorting about the situation caused by Sam. Then, Jim asks the dark-haired man when he intends to get married. Resigned from that tiresome chatter, Theodore only replies that eventually, he will marry. Theodore counters, "You shouldn't be saying that since you're struggling to get married." But the blonde man retorts that all problems would cease after Theodore married and had a child, solving the confusion. Turning his face away from Jim, Theodore tells him he does not want the young man's opinion and orders him to bring Sam before him if he finds him. Jim, filing his nails, accepts the orders of the clan leader. An employee subtly calls Theodore, informing him that he has already sent a travel ban for Samuel and that there are no signs of use of the young man's credit card. Theodore thanks the employee for his efforts and dismisses him. Turning to Jim in silence, the young man in golden garments only asks him to trust him. Sneakily, he asks Theodore what he will gain from this, and the man tells him to consider it a kind of debt. Without taking his eyes off his meticulously filed nails, Jim asks why Theodore does not marry their little princess, and if he had noticed that she has been playing hard to get for the last 5 years. Theodore only replies that it is impossible. For a moment, Jim's presumptuous demeanor turns threatening, and then back to normal, asking him why he gave that answer. Theodore replies frankly that Jim's sister might go mad, just like his late sister-in-law from the Yu family. He closes his eyes and takes a deep breath as he recalls what happened, and adds that Jim's sister is not suitable for his clan. Suddenly, Jim's hand grips Theodore's shoulder tightly. Pulling the dark-haired man closer, with a slight growl in his voice, Jim asks Theodore what he is talking about. His gaze changed drastically, from presumptuous to malevolent, as he asked Theodore how he dared to refer to his sister Camille that way. Jim's long nails pierce Theodore's suit jacket. Theodore rebukes him with a furious look. With a sweep of his arm, he signals the nearby employees to step back. The employees glance at each other in silence and end up not intervening in the situation. The other members of the meeting wonder what is happening. Theodore stares at Jim with disdain, who stares back at him in silent fury. The blonde man sighs with satisfaction and removes his toxin-stained nails from Theodore's shoulder. While licking his long claws, Jim tells him he was just reminiscing about the good old days and got carried away. Letting out a brief sigh, Theodore decides it is time for them to leave that meeting. One of the men at the meeting begins to shout, outraged that the family leader will absent himself from that never-ending discussion. The two men leave the room, claiming that they could not resolve the drastic situation without Samuel present, and that from there, the elders could rest. Irritated, the gray-haired man watches the two leave the meeting. In a decompression room furnished with chairs, tables, books, and a selection of drinks, Theodore slightly winces as he touches the wound on his shoulder caused by Jim. Trying to ease the injury, the dark-haired man asks, "What were your intentions in sinking your toxic claws into me?" Smiling innocently, Jim simply replies that it was because Theo annoyed him. Then, to heal him, the blonde man licks the wounds he himself had caused. And then, adopting a posture like a little girl, the young man asks if he had never heard of being the cause and the cure for someone's illness, while Theodore only replies that he had never heard of that. Quickly changing his expression, Jim asks seriously what was wrong with Theodore marrying his sister Camille. Admiring the view from a tall window, Theodore reminds him that women who give birth to the heirs of those families are prone to mix their DNA with theirs, and therefore end up going mad. Jim asks him if the same happened with his mother. Theodore replies that what happened to her was something similar, since she already had a horrible personality. Remembering his origin, he tells the young man that his mother also tried to devour him at birth, but suddenly ended up eating something else so as not to harm him. And in that way, she ended up hurting herself. Closing his eyes, he recalls that it was that will that kept her from going completely insane, but Sam was not so lucky. Jim asks if Samuel's mother had also tried to devour him, and Theodore confirms that yes, this happened when he was still too young to protect Samuel, but he ended up raising him as his younger brother and even witnessed him opening his eyes for the first time. Understanding then the reason for Theodore's overprotection toward the younger man, Jim watches the dark-haired man light a cigarette. Facing the window, Theodore says that some people claim this trait is what characterizes the Seo family, when in truth it is more likely to happen to people who marry into a pure family. Jim agrees, stating how complex it is to avoid marriages between high-lineage families because of closed marriage policies. The blonde man ponders that despite everything, that had not happened in the marriages of his family. Taking a drag of his cigarette, Theodore states that he is aware of that fact. The two men talk in that environment, and Jim asks if Theodore will reject his family. A memory shows a young woman with long blonde hair, in red garments and holding a fan that hides her face, while Jim encourages Theodore to consider the proposal of union, since the women of the Tin family are very strong. Theodore silently exhales the cigarette smoke. In a tone of mystery, he continues, and he elaborates on the hypothesis. If something tragic were to happen between Camille and him, would Jim be able to keep his words? Taking another drag, Theodore states that surely they would go to war. In silence, Jim consents, thinking there would be a great war on a completely different level if something happened to his sister. Touching the back of the dark-haired man, Jim gracefully says that Theodore is saying all that because he likes him a lot, right? Paralyzed with fear, Jennifer does not know if what is in front of her is a dream or a hallucination caused by the alcohol. From one corner of the attic, a male figure emanates a metallic and sticky smell, staring threateningly at the protagonist. Despite her fear, the young woman manages to notice that he has pointed ears and long fangs. "Bad luck, huh?" says the vampiric figure as he touches Jennifer's chin, who also notices his sharp claws. She realizes he is capable of speaking and is definitely a monster. Considering the situation they are in, Jenny perceives that both of them seem to be unlucky, including him, who already seemed to have lost much of his strength. She looks more attentively at him and notices a detail. Observing the creature's stained shirt, she asks if he is injured. Suddenly, a very large hand grabs the delicate neck of the young woman tightly. The monster begins to smile malevolently. Curling his lips back to show the pointed fangs, the monster says that although the girl is nothing but skin and bones, devouring her will be enough for him. Despite the strong grip on her neck, Jennifer manages to ask him if he eats humans. At that moment, she realizes that he was not joking but speaking very seriously. She notices the sparkle of zirconia on his pointed ear, and also the elegant luxury watch he wears on one of his hands. Calmly, Jennifer states that she can take care of him, and the monster looks at her deeply surprised by that offer. A drop of sweat runs down the monster's face, disturbed by the thought of such a fragile human taking care of him. She insists that she can treat his wounds if he needs care, thinking that although he is a monster, he can speak properly and make eye contact. She suggests going downstairs to fetch clean towels. Then, softly, she raises her hands, asking him to stay there. Tormented by the pain, he warns her of something. She is confused and stares back at the man. Without understanding, she had pressed on the large wound on the young man's abdomen, who, with his broken ribs, was already beginning to faint. Then, suddenly, his eyes turn white and he loses consciousness, and he falls to the ground with a dull thud at the young woman's feet. She contemplates her own stained hands, aware that she did not want to cause any of that. He sleeps softly, bathed in the sunlight that was beginning to rise. On Jennifer's sofa, Samuel rests after the dangerous escape of the previous night. In the bathroom, the young woman begins to take her shower. In silence, she seems to be assimilating everything that happened in the last hours. She looks at the dried stains on her hand. Momentarily, the young woman loses herself in her thoughts and her gaze is distant. She leaves the shower, with drops of water dripping on the bathroom floor. Remembering the previous night, Jennifer had to carry with great effort the immense body of the monster, who had fainted in her attic. She pants, holds her breath, and strains to move him through the house, and she places the sleeping man on the living room sofa. Trembling from exhaustion, she bends over him, relieving her back, while the man lies completely unconscious in the small living room. He groans softly in pain. She turns to fetch some wet wipes. With a wipe in hand, Jennifer sits beside him on the small sofa, noticing how damaged his skin is, questioning herself what kind of being would cause such wounds. The young woman gently rubs his face to clean the small cuts. Lost in her thoughts as she cleans the dried stains, she confesses she never imagined she would find herself caring for someone, but suddenly he seemed to have fallen from the sky. She carefully rubs the wipe on his abdomen, noticing that despite him being a monster, his body had been very mistreated. With difficulty, Samuel asks her if she had brought him down there. Resigned, Jenny answers that he was very heavy and that it was hard to clean the stains since they were dried. She rubs the spot that hurts him the most, despite the young man's protests. Tormented by pain, he asks her to relax her hands, but she only replies that it is difficult. She applies light pressure on his body, claiming that he fell from the second-story window, but that she cannot stand that much pain. Embarrassed, he remains silent. Then the young woman asks him if he would like to be taken to a hospital. He refuses, claiming he will feel better after a night's sleep. She turns to leave, going to fetch a change of clothes for him. Still lying on the sofa, Sam asks Jennifer if she wasn't feeling any fear of him, and if she suspected he could kill her. Already a little farther away, she turns back to him and asks, "Would you kill me this instant?" She opens a wardrobe, searching for some clothes, and answers, "In that case, yes." It's scary. He considers that her expression is not that of a very frightened person, while she throws some clean clothes to him. Leaving the room, Jennifer confesses to him that it does not matter if he is a monster or a criminal, but asks him please to leave her house as soon as he feels better. In Samuel's view, he notices her as a woman who does not flinch at the sight of a strange puddle, and who is neither sarcastic nor pretending to be strong. He finds it impressive that she did not react to the fact that he is not human. And Sam thinks she seems like someone who has seen everything already, and has been exhausted for a long time, as if she felt like a miserable adult. He looks at the young woman, wondering if she has been a wounded soul for a long time, but that this matter is not his concern. He turns to the side, falling asleep again. She notices that he has fallen asleep once more, and wonders why he asked if she would be afraid. Taking a sip of her drink, she thinks about how strange that young man is. The lights in the small apartment go out. Suddenly, the young woman is abruptly shaken from her thoughts by hearing the screams of the monster boy. "Come now, I want to eat." She mentally compares him to a wild animal whining for food. While she finishes her bath, telling him she is coming, he keeps shouting, "I lost a lot of vital force yesterday. I warned you that I need to eat to recover." In her thoughts, Jennifer judges him to be very ungrateful, and even thinks she should not have saved him. Samuel is dismayed, thinking he has ruined his situation in relation to the clan. Desolate, still in the small living room, he asks himself what is happening. He cannot believe he is receiving help from a human. The man quickly recalls the clan members who wounded him and who must still be after him even after that night. He wonders what is to come. He remembers having destroyed anything traceable, such as cell phones, and knows that if the young woman reported him to the police, the Yu family could discover his whereabouts. He tells himself that the real problem is that woman, who is in the shower. Cheered by the thought of feeding and regaining a little energy, he walks to the kitchen. Samuel then opens the fridge, which was completely empty, only alcohol and orange juice inside. He wonders how that woman could endure living that way. She, from the bathroom wrapped in a white towel, tells him that she had asked him to leave, but instead he was whining for food. Arrogant, he says that makes no sense, and asks her, "How can I trust you?" Approaching the young woman, he states that there was no way to trust her, since she could simply go out and report him. Discouraged, she assumes that he truly needs a lot of help. Jennifer turns to go put on some clothes, asking Samuel, since when were they intimate enough to eat together? Meanwhile, he gets irritated with her attitude. He complains, claiming that he needs to eat a lot of meat since he lost much life force, and she asks him if he would eat pork belly, to which he promptly retorts that he does not eat cheap food. She asks him to wait a little and not stand there like a pervert. The young woman closes the door behind her while he stands there, not understanding what happened. Samuel trembles with hunger in the hallway while waiting for the young woman to get dressed. He tells her that she is a very strange woman, but Jennifer surprises him by saying that she thinks the same of him. The young woman leaves the room, dressed in comfortable clothes, and asks the young man what he is looking at. They stare at each other for a few moments. She cannot help but notice how handsome he looks wearing her father's clothes. Presumptuous, he asks her, "Already falling in love with me?" Unshaken, she turns and leaves, saying, "In your dreams." They walk together down the street. Samuel, with his spoiled boy attitude, asks Jennifer if she does not have a car. She denies it and tells him there is no need to own one. Annoyed with the answer, he tells her she sounds miserable. Throughout the entire walk, Sam complains about many things to Jenny. That she is not attractive but does not wear makeup, that her clothes are old, that she does not have a car. Geez. Then Jennifer turns to Samuel and asks if she looks like a miserable person. And in the background, many dogs are heard barking. Samuel promptly answers her that she looks like she would jump into the Han River at any moment. They continue the walk, Jenny very bothered by his comments, and they still hear the barking of the dog. She turns to notice the animal that was restless. Right behind them in the small street, a brown dog barks incessantly, apparently bothered by something. While Jenny finds the dog's behavior strange, since it normally is not agitated that way, Samuel approaches from behind her, glaring furiously at the animal. He looks at the dog with a malevolent expression. Jenny shrinks slightly in fear, questioning herself if he had ever eaten something like that. The dog keeps barking, showing its sharp canines. Suddenly, completely changing its posture, the animal tucks its tail between its hind legs, trembling and bristling. He laughs, convinced. Samuel, with a terrifying facial expression, tells the dog that no matter the size of his hunger, it could not be devoured. He asks if the animal will continue barking at him, and the dog begins to faint. Jenny is impressed and frightened while watching that scene. The dog faints on the ground without any injury. She clutches her clothes fearfully, pondering if the dog fainted at his command. Hugging her own body, Jenny questions where that unpleasant chill comes from. Samuel places his hand on the young woman's shoulder. Pulling her closer, he whispers near her neck, asking her if he can be honest now. She shrinks, scared. Her clenched fists tremble with fear. He begins to say that if she were not so skinny, she would already have been devoured, says Samuel with a frightening smile. Observing the whole situation, Jennifer finally realizes that he is a monster who sees humans as food. She tries to calm herself, thinking that if he wanted to end her life, he would have already done so. Jennifer lets out a sigh and reveals that she does not think someone like her, wearing worn clothes and not very attractive, would be able to satisfy his appetite, leaving him speechless. Shivering with hunger, he says that she is right. Trying to defend himself, he says he would not eat the dog, and she, hearing all that, considers him an idiot. Samuel accuses the young woman of ignoring his words and calls her a cold woman. She in turn promptly retorts, stating that everything he says is nonsense, and that no woman is obliged to smile or respond to everything he says. Quickly, a taxi approaches them. She calls the car, ignoring the protests of the young man who continues to complain constantly. The two get into the vehicle, and rudely Sam asks the taxi driver to take them to Gangnam Station. He sits with arms crossed and clearly in a bad mood, while Jennifer observes him and notices how different he was from the previous night. In silence, she reflects on whether she is going crazy or seeing things. In a quick flashback of what happened on the street earlier that day, she understands that staying close to him is not good. She covers one of her hands, trying to hide her thoughts. Samuel glances at the young woman's hands, which trembled discreetly. He takes advantage of the situation to give a smug smile. Finally, they arrive at the requested place, and the taxi driver asks how they would like to pay. Sam opens a wallet and takes out some bills. He hands the money to the driver, and at that very moment, Jenny realizes that wallet was hers. How did he take it without the young woman seeing? They leave the car, and Samuel is relieved that now they can go after food, while the young woman only watches him apprehensively. A blonde-haired man calls his companion's attention, claiming that she had been watching a certain young man for a while, but she embarrassedly denies it. On the street, there is a buzz of women who notice Samuel's presence, remarking how handsome he is, and wondering if he is a model or an idol. Jenny notices the women's reaction to how attractive Sam is. Suddenly, the monster boy grabs the young woman by the arm. He asks why she is standing there and orders her to hurry to go eat. As the two walk quickly, several women pull out their phones to photograph them, trying to find out who that young man is. He gets irritated with the girl's nuisance and considers the whole situation very troublesome. Many girls, much younger than Jennifer, joke among themselves, trying to figure out Samuel's identity. In his thoughts, he considers that if all this attention reaches Sebastian Yu, the influential relative of his ex-wife, he may be located. Furthermore, he remembers that his body is still not fully recovered. Enraged, he thinks about how hard it is to go out to eat in this situation. Directing his fury at Jenny, he continues to grip her arm tightly, ordering her to hurry, even under the young woman's protests for him to let her go. Annoyed, she asks him, why would he want so much to go out to eat with her? Briefly reflecting, she thinks she never expected any kind of normality in her life, and that she carries a very dark reality inside her. Looking at the people walking the busy streets, Jennifer feels they live in a world completely different from hers. Being firmly pulled by Sam while walking through the crowd, the young woman reflects that in broad daylight, everything is at peace except herself. Sadly, she thinks how ironic it is that this is the closest she has come to feeling like a normal person because of that monster, and that it had been a long time since she envied the normal life that other people live. On the way to the restaurant, she hears her own stomach growling, wondering how she can feel hungry at a time like that. She silently observes Sam in astonishment. Samuel chews vigorously on a large piece of meat. She notices that he had already eaten 7 plates of steak and was on the 7th bottle of French wine. She continues to watch him, seeing him as a monster disguised as a man. Pointing to the young woman's plate, which had salmon with white sauce, he asks her if she was not going to eat. She eats a portion of the salmon and tells him that it had been a long time since the last time she had a meal accompanied by someone. He shows her a small roll and asks her to eat plenty and not bother him. In front of him are several dishes of food and a basket of rolls. Nibbling on the snack he handed her, she found it amusing that he gave her only one, even though there were several in the basket. However, because of that monster, it was the first time in a long while that she had lunched with company. Wondering if she should thank him in some way, Jenny hands her credit card to pay the bill. Frightened by the high value of the bill, the waitress awkwardly confirms if the consumption was only for 2 people. Jennifer sighs and confirms, mentally regretting having paid the full amount. The two walk out of the restaurant. Considering that Samuel should already be satisfied, Jenny says that he can now go his way and tries to say goodbye to him. But the monster boy stops her, asking her, what was she talking about? Let's go shopping. Irritated with his petulance, she turns and asks why she would go shopping with him. He points in the direction of a store that, even if not his favorite, is the chosen place. But the young woman does not give in. Jennifer then questions him when he will be satisfied and warns him that she is leaving now, because she does not want to get involved with a stupid monster like him. Samuel stares at her in silence. Turning to the young woman, he cautiously approaches and asks if she would like him to give her a ride and flirt with her, or if he should kneel and thank her for cleaning his stains. Furious with Sam's arrogant manner, she sees him as an insolent man and firmly tells him that if things continue that way, she will run away. But at first, he only shows an evil smile. Grabbing a lock of Jenny's hair, Sam comes even closer, ridiculing her for the idea of running away, and tells her that this is his way of rewarding her. He begins to speak near her neck, but she, in a burst of anger, interrupts the monster's speech, accusing him of keeping her alive instead of simply finishing her off. That was not fun at all. Sam changes his expression to a threatening look. Jenny lights a cigarette and tells him how fed up she is with being alive, and that thanks to him, living is even more miserable. Suddenly, his large hands grab the fragile young woman's shoulders. Samuel, manipulative, tells Jenny that she talks too much without having knowledge of the circumstances in which she finds herself. The young woman stares at him, astonished, while he, in a threatening manner, offers to cut out her tongue. He laughs, baring his sharp fangs, and says, maybe that way she could live a calm and silent life. She feels chills as he takes the cigarette from her lips, realizing that they were the same chills she felt when he dominated the dog. Samuel throws the young woman's cigarette to the ground, laughing as he says that humans should only be obedient and do what they are told. Strong chills torment Jennifer, and her body shakes uncontrollably as she wonders what was happening. He uses one of his hands to press the young woman's body against his own. Bringing her close to him, regaining his usual charms, Samuel invites her once again to go shopping. Already in Jenny's apartment, the lights are off. The young woman grabs a can of drink and opens the large fridge in front of her, and she is startled at the sight in front of her. She looks around, clearly confused. She asks herself if that is really her house. Touching her head, she realizes she does not remember how she got home after the outing with the monster boy. She is surprised by the fridge full of fresh food, remembering that after her mother received the diagnosis of her illness, she only ate pastries from a bakery in Gangnam instead of proper meals. And the result of that was always an empty fridge. Cautiously, she keeps looking around, wondering who could have stocked the fridge with food. She realizes there is a blackout in her memory. She begins to recall the previous day and that after lunch with Samuel, they argued a lot. Moreover, she can remember the fear she felt and the urgent desire to return home. Rationalizing the past events, she realizes she felt like she was being hypnotized. Jennifer then wonders if all that was real. She turns on the living room lights with a subtle click. Slightly dazed by the sudden illumination, she covers her eyes, also asking herself what might have happened while she was unconscious. She sees boxes of sophisticated and expensive perfumes, and also designer clothing bags. Frightened by all of it, she sees in front of her living room stuffed with very expensive gifts and several bags from elegant stores. She looks at the gifts, indignant with the monster's audacity. Holding a chic fragrance, she realizes she would personally never buy items like those. Jennifer does not understand how all that happened, trying to grasp how she bought such expensive things, and that it all must be the doing of the monster boy. Growing in indignation, she even sees cigarettes more expensive than what she usually smokes. Resigned, she tells herself she can always buy a different pack. But what could she do with the rest of the things? She holds the bags, considering returning them to ask for a refund, since the price tags frighten her. Jennifer understands she could not return the food in the fridge, but cheers herself with the thought of trying to cook in the coming days. Suddenly, she sees a sophisticated black box on her coffee table. It is a box containing the latest version of a very expensive smartphone. Totally surprised, she walks over to the item, doubting her own eyes. She holds the small black box, seeing that it is the most recent model released on the market. After opening the box, Jenny asks herself how she could have managed to buy it, since an ID is required when leaving the store. Then she pictures herself completely hypnotized by him while signing the necessary papers to take the smartphone home. Jennifer stares at the object, absorbed in her thoughts, blaming Samuel. Out of nowhere, the phone starts vibrating, and startled, Jenny throws the device into the air. Picking it up again, she looks closely at the screen and sees that it is her aunt calling. Upon answering, Jenny immediately regrets it as she hears her aunt shouting her name desperately, while complaining that the young woman had not answered earlier. Her aunt constantly complains that Jennifer needs to notify her every time she leaves the house. Relieved to hear her aunt's voice, Jenny gives the first smile we see in the story. Sitting on the sofa, Jenny realizes that, although she used to find her aunt annoying, she now felt relieved to hear a familiar voice. The young woman apologizes to the lady, explaining that she had not contacted her earlier because her old phone had broken. Still complaining on the phone, the aunt tells her she could have borrowed a phone from a neighbor, but Jennifer tells her there was work to do, and if they could resume the conversation later. Resigned, the lady tells her she will bring kimchi tomorrow and asks her, "Why is your voice so weak? Are you sick by any chance?" Jenny slumps on the sofa without an appropriate answer to tell her aunt, thinking that she had been hypnotized by a vampire and went shopping because of him. Unable to admit all that madness to the lady on the phone, Jennifer tells her that she has been very tired lately. Smiling, she accepts her aunt's advice to take medicine and rest, and then the two hang up the phone. She lets her hand drop, still holding the device. Tired of the whole situation, she reclines on the sofa, desperately hoping that the monster boy will not come back to find her. Jenny cuts some bundles of grass. Shielding herself from the sun, our protagonist admires the hard work she did cleaning the garden. She pats herself on the shoulder, celebrating having finished the gardening. Noticing that it was long past lunchtime, she decides to resume work later. Weeks after cleaning the dried stains and the damage caused by the rain in the attic, she notices that it had been weeks since the monster last appeared. Reaching for a bag of milk bread, Jenny tells herself that the only good thing about that monster being around is that the fridge, which used to be empty with only alcoholic drinks and water, was now full of good food. Jennifer prepares a delicious sandwich. She looks at the food, remembering a not-so-distant past when, on the worst days, she would eat only a cabbage leaf. The young woman feels happy imagining that her aunt interpreted these signs as her eating better, which is something she would never have been able to do while living with her mother. While drying the leaves with a paper towel, Jenny remembers her mother. In the background, a door slams shut, while the young woman remembers how her mother became more sensitive after receiving her diagnosis and going through so many caregivers. In her relaxing bath, Jennifer remembers how her mother remained very sensitive, even after her own daughter became her caregiver. She reaches out for the towel, lamenting her mother's suffering. Rubbing her hair, already dressed, she reflects that she thought a great weight would be lifted from her shoulders after her passing. However, suddenly, on the kitchen table, she sees an envelope on the plate where she had left the sandwich. Confused, she picks up the envelope, wondering what it was. Upon opening it, she sees that the envelope was full of money. Still in shock, she reads the note that had been left with the bills. And meanwhile, outside, a dog barks constantly. The note says the sandwich was horrible, and she, trembling, realizes that Samuel had been there. She looks around quickly but sees no trace that he might have left. Alone in her house, Jenny understands then that the only vestige of the monster's unexpected visit is the dog barking outside, bothered by his presence. We are taken to a flashback of the past, where we see a couple together, and Theodore tells us that since his childhood, he was able to distinguish the smell of his parents from other people. A young Theodore watches an elegant woman and reflects on how his family was different. Sullen, he thinks how that fact was not something good, because looking at his father and his stepmother, he realizes he cannot smell her. In a great mansion, desperate screams are heard. He anxiously stomps the floor with his expensive little shoes. Meanwhile, a butler tries to calm him, saying that soon he will be able to meet his little brother. Theodore remembers his mother's words, who was poisoned by him during childbirth. So the young boy assumes that his stepmother must be going through the same situation, possibly going mad. Suddenly, we return to the present, and Theodore, who is narrating, ends the story and asks if Jim was satisfied after hearing all that. Dramatic, Jim replies that horror story left him depressed, and that Theodore should have warned him. To which the man promptly asks, "Are you calling a family drama a horror story?" Jim then asks him if he was not too young to be promoted to family leader, and the dark-haired man replies that his father was an irresponsible man who was unable to protect his wife and child, so his removal from the position was natural. After carefully listening to Theodore's words, the blonde young man asks him about his father's irresponsibility, and the other replies that he went on vacation right during the period when his stepmother would give birth to Samuel. Annoyed, Theodore asks Jim if he wants to hear what happened next, but the young man refuses, saying he remembers that during this same period the two of them were much younger and taking classes in Hong Kong. Then, Theodore asks that the questions about marriage end once and for all, and Jim agrees to drop the subject. For now. Reflecting, the blonde young man understands that Theodore does not necessarily dislike his sister, but that she would have great potential now that she is a complete woman. However, at that very moment, she would be with his real mother. Jim gives a mysterious smile, wondering what kind of reaction Theodore would have when he finds this out. Soon after, Mark Seo, one of Theodore's family members, enters, and seeing that Jim is present, asks if he should return later. Jim promptly tells him to report what he discovered about Samuel's whereabouts, since he is very curious, and Theodore asks for his report. Mark informs them about a large amount withdrawn from the bank account of the young fugitive. He suspects the money will be used for Samuel's continued escape, although there is no trace of activity on his credit card. Jim, sitting on the sofa, wonders what the members of the Yu family will be doing. Theodore dismisses Mark, and the young man bows respectfully and leaves the room. Distracted, Jim hears Theodore suggest he go after some leads. The dark-haired man then suggests that if Jim intended to stay there only amusing himself and feeding his curiosity, he could go help, as he had promised before. Jim eagerly tells Theodore that his people are also making great efforts to find the fugitive. Narrowing his eyes maliciously, Jim tells Theodore that the easiest solution is for that bastard to disappear. But not only that, Samuel would have to disappear without leaving any trace. With a wicked smile, Jim continues saying that despite the obvious situation, Samuel has no sense of self-control, and if he goes barking around, the members will find him collapsed and foaming at the mouth. Resigned, Theodore asks the blonde young man to continue and asks him if he thought it was a good idea to capture Samuel first and only then take him to the Yu family. Smiling tenderly, Jim asks Theodore to trust him. Strictly, Jennifer's aunt tells the young woman always to eat well and rest for the entire month, though she agrees with some light entertainment. The brown-haired lady tells her niece to call her if anything happens, and awkwardly, Jenny agrees. As she leaves, Jennifer's aunt tells her that her uncle saw some job openings for her at his company, and politely, the young woman thanks her for all the help. The door closes with a quiet click. Jenny feels relieved with the stillness of the house. And right after, she pulls out a cigarette, having held back the urge as much as possible so as not to smoke in front of her aunt. The young woman turns on a speaker, wanting to enjoy her free time alone. The soft melody of I Wish You Love by Rachel Yamagata begins to play, the slow music filling the house. Jennifer enjoys the music sitting on her sofa. The slow melody progresses. Our protagonist finally begins to relax and closes her eyes, as if she were about to fall asleep. She leans back on the sofa, relaxed, finally starting to doze off. Suddenly, she opens her eyes, awakened by a familiar male voice asking, "Does your future look more promising?" She wakes with a start, seeing Samuel standing in her living room. He smiles smugly, saying that her house was gloomy before. Jenny, outraged, asks the monster boy if he had come in again through the window, since she had not heard the doorbell, and he, ignoring her question, says that even her skin looks better. He touches the young woman's hair, asking her if after everything that happened, that is what bothers her. She asks him to keep his hands off her. Jenny asks him, "Was that money left in the envelope a payment for the sandwich?" He sits beside the young woman on the sofa, unbelieving of her words. Samuel replies that he did that, fearing she might have felt wronged since the clothes and perfumes were paid for with her card, but she says she will return the remaining amounts to him while getting up from the sofa. He laughs, asking Jennifer what she intends to do with the items, and warns her that he intends to show up a few more times to have some snacks once in a while, and that she could consider that money a kind of payment for the food. Paralyzed with fear, Jennifer turns to the monster boy, asking if it was true that he intended to come back there more often. Sam arrogantly laughs at her question and answers the young woman that she says very funny things. And of course, he intends to go there more often. And Jenny mentally calls him a shameless man. The young woman grabs one of her cigarettes and tells him that she does not find any of that funny. Basically, the situation of a man showing up at her house whenever it is convenient for him. A new melody begins to play, and Sam reveals to the young woman that he quite likes that song. Jenny then realizes that while they were talking, a new song was playing. Samuel compliments Jenny's musical taste. Confused, she asks the young man if he also liked that song. He smiles. This time there is no malice on his lips, and he tells Jennifer that his brother is quite a fan of that sound and plays it many times. In her thoughts, our protagonist is shocked, thinking that there are others of Samuel's kind out there. Facing the large living room window, Jenny asks the monster boy if he has other relatives, but he replies that no, his brother was his only family. He looks at the young woman and tells her that just like her, his brother also smoked frequently. With a cigarette on her lips, the young woman absorbs that information. She reflects on how, although he is a monster with unimaginable powers, the conversation at that moment made it seem as if the previous events had never happened, because he was behaving like a normal human. Friendly, Samuel approaches Jenny, complimenting her for cleaning the house and the garden, saying that before the house seemed haunted. But she had done a good job, and the young woman confirms, saying she did a little gardening. He continues giving suggestions to put in new plants after the full moon, buy some new chairs for the garden, and then plant some peonies, which would last a long time. He goes on, saying that this way next year they will have a beautiful garden, very green and full of flowers, without the need for a flower bed. Our protagonist takes a drag after hearing the monster boy's suggestions, thinking that those kinds of ideas are nice once in a while. And after that, she hears the man she judged to be a monster humming. Samuel whispers the lyrics of the song, "Fly Me to the Moon," which fills the living room. She listens closely to the young man's voice, blending with the melody of the song. Closing her eyes, she becomes immersed in that moment of peace. At her side, she then begins to see him as a man who appreciates the classics because of his brother. However, when she turns to finally ask his name, she realizes he has vanished in broad daylight. She looks around, understanding that she is completely alone, realizing that she did not even know the monster boy's name, but she was certain that soon he would return. After that day, our protagonist receives occasional visits from Samuel, but she never had the courage to ask him exactly why that recurrence. Either way, even if she asked, she knew too well that he did whatever he wanted. Samuel greets her by her name while holding a cup of coffee. Intrigued, the young woman, just out of her bath, questions him how he knew her name. Then he promptly replies that it was the day they bought her new cell phone. At the dining table, we see a beautiful salad and a plate of spaghetti, and Samuel asks Jenny why she wanted a job all of a sudden. Taking a forkful of spaghetti, she tells him it is just a temporary position at a magazine publisher, then asks him not to show up during the day from then on, since no one would be home to feed him. Outraged, he asks her what kind of publisher that was and what she could possibly do in a place like that. She does not understand his question, and he retorts, noticing the young woman's attitude. Jenny becomes saddened, thinking about the young man's rude words. While they dine, she asks him if he was trying to say that she is not capable of doing anything. Samuel, with a smug smile, says that she was an expert at doing nothing, and she thinks that all this attitude of his was because she told him to stop coming to the house. He continues and says that in a temporary job, she would only do boring or trivial tasks, and that she would gain nothing from it. Jennifer replies that she cannot spend her whole life without a job, just playing around and eating. Surprisingly, Sam says that he can support her with his money, which startles Jenny, who practically spits out her food. Ignoring Jenny's complaints, Samuel opens his wallet, which was full of high-value bills. The red-haired man puts the money on the table and asks her to stop refusing that amount, because proud stubbornness is very exhausting. Jennifer firmly tells him that there is no reason why she deserves to have that money. Not quite understanding how the logic of the world of normal people works, he asks the young woman, "Is it mandatory that all humans work? That's not even funny." Still complaining, Sam says that instead of a magazine publisher, she should sign up for cooking classes because her food was still bad despite a long time having passed. Furious at the monster boy's rude words, Jennifer stands her ground and tells him to stop interfering in her life while slamming her fist on the table. Resigned, she continues, saying that she understands the fact that he is rich and powerful, but that he has no right to cross those boundaries. Our protagonist sees Samuel as a monster without manners, whose power has gone to his head because of his money. Since he feels entitled to mistreat unprivileged people, it makes no sense to treat him as a human being. She glares at him furiously while he provokes her with his arrogant speech. Then, trying to ease things, the monster boy tells her that she takes things the wrong way. and that just because he thinks she's cute, it doesn't mean she can say whatever she wants. The two face each other in the kitchen, and Samuel points his finger at Jenny. With an abrupt change of look, he tells the young woman that the two of them were different down to the soul. Our protagonist, hurt, looks at him with sad eyes. She watches him intently as he rudely tells her to accept the money graciously and that he was being generous for taking care of her. And then she asks him since when had she ever asked him to take care of her? After all, he was merely a guest in her house. Feeling angry, she tells him that he has no right to say such words to her since there is nothing between them. Samuel adopts a cynical posture and begins to mock Jenny, asking what had irritated the young woman. Leaning forward, he puts one hand on his chin and says that he finally understood. He quickly rises from the table. Encircling her from behind, he asked Jenny if she had really thought there was any kind of connection between the two of them. Maintaining a threatening tone, he displayed a wicked smile as he said that, fortunately for some creatures, the concept of class still existed. To him, she was like that dog that fainted long ago and had only been spared by the monster's generosity. Now, in a manipulative tone, he says that things would become complicated if she began to think they were on the same level. Our protagonist is clearly uncomfortable with the whole situation. She abruptly rises from the table while the monster continues to say that Jennifer should do something about her empty gaze, and that after he had started taking care of her, that was beginning to improve. But now all that effort seems to have been in vain. The young woman begins to walk away from him, and the young man, surprised, asks where she thinks she is going. She slams the door loudly under the monster's protests, who asks if she was really going to ignore him. Jennifer lights a cigarette even while feeling a pain in her guts. Deeply hurt by the situation, she realizes she was mistaken about having built a friendship with the monster, and that it was only a misunderstanding. Taking a drag, she assimilates that for him such a connection never existed, and that for Samuel, she must be nothing more than a pet. Sitting on her bed while smoking, she feels like an idiot for having believed they were friends, just because he had sung a beautiful song to her. After that day, she was certain that for that monster boy, people were merely toys. Lost in her thoughts, she wonders if there is any way to get rid of him. Out of nowhere, Jenny's new phone begins to ring, and she sees her uncle's name on the screen. She answers, greeting him, and he asks her if she is doing well and if nothing had happened since the last time they met. Jennifer tells him that everything is fine with her, and the gentleman surprises her by saying that there was a job opening, then asking her how soon she could start, and the young woman says as soon as the next day. Our protagonist's uncle is happy with the news. He cheers up, wishing that his niece will regain her energy. She hears him ask her to go to the office the next day with her resume, and when he begins to talk about the illness that took her mother's life, Jennifer has an immediate reaction to the mention of the tragedy. Politely, but a little unsettled, she ends her uncle's call. Stunned but relieved, she looks at the phone imagining the collapse she would fall into if the old man had finished his sentences. She does not want the world to know her weaknesses. Our protagonist is determined not to depend on anyone around her. After all, after briefly trusting Samuel, she had her trust betrayed more than once, as he seemed to punish her out of pure pride. She then makes a vow that she will not be deceived by a monster whose origin she does not even know. Quickly, she opens her bedroom door, and screaming, she calls the monster boy to have a serious conversation. However, her house is silent and empty, all objects in their places. Frightened, she wonders if he has gone away. She sees the untouched dishes on the dining table. Jennifer cannot understand the monster boy's disappearance, for despite so many circumstances, he did not seem like the type to abandon a discussion. Alone in her house, she relives bad familiar sensations as she steps on something sticky on the floor. She looks back with curiosity and sees the same stains that were on her floor the day he arrived there. Gathering courage, our protagonist walks up to the stains. She observes and sees a small dead animal in the hallway. Paralyzed, the protagonist understands that the monster boy gave her a lesson, with the only language he knew, violence, for having opposed him. He gathered his fury and took it out on a defenseless being. In her thoughts, Jenny curses him many times for having committed something so cruel. She holds the little creature in her hands, questioning why such cruelty. Suffering from that completely unexpected tragedy, the young woman sinks into sadness. In her garden, she wonders if she will be his next victim, and if she should keep a knife nearby. Now, feeling anger toward Samuel, she swears to herself that she would not give up at any cost. In a very elegant bar, there are several bottles of drinks. Samuel is sitting at the counter and a blonde woman approaches, trying to strike up a conversation with him, asking if he is alone. He replies seductively that if that is what she wants, then yes, he is alone, and the young woman places her delicate hand over his. He gives her a friendly smile. His gaze turns away as he reflects on how humans change their behavior according to the situation. According to him, that presumptuous woman did not understand the extent of his generosity and care, rejecting him, and he wonders what else he could have done to make her understand him, since, for him, only terror educates the weak. With a slightly annoyed look, he judges her a tiring woman to be around. Concerned, the attractive blonde young woman asks him if he is uncomfortable with her. Samuel smiles casually and tells the young woman it is nothing, and invites her to leave the bar together. The monster boy, with a seductive look, says he would like to stay with her longer. The young woman smiles shyly, responding that she would love to spend more time with him. And in his thoughts, Samuel reveals that he likes obedient people. Then, his thoughts lead him to Jenny, who he thinks must be crying because of the little wicked present he left her. Sam leads the blonde young woman out of the establishment, and she seems happy to accompany him, unsuspecting of the young man's true identity. As they leave, he thinks that Jenny will get what's coming to her. In an office, we see desks, chairs, and many organized cubicles containing papers, notebooks, and some books. And someone asked Jennifer to organize some materials there. Jenny, newly arrived at her new job, is dressed formally and carries some objects to be arranged. In the same room, Jenny from afar manages to hear a brown-haired young woman looking annoyed at a cell phone, wondering where the photographer who was supposed to accompany her to an interview could be. While organizing some folders, Jenny observes the situation and wonders what could be happening there. A female voice calls her name, and she looks surprised to be summoned on her very first day. The brown-haired young woman invites our protagonist to accompany her to an interview, and Jenny is confused, not knowing how to handle the situation. Determined, the young woman explains that there are no other professionals to summon so immediately, and insists that Jennifer accompany her. Our protagonist, wanting to escape that mission, asks her coworker if it really is not a problem for her to go, but the young woman encourages her, saying that everyone learns that way, and Jenny grabs her bag. The young woman, apparently a journalist, tells her that the day's topic is about pets and that they will go to a dog cafe, and that our protagonist's task is only to take photos. Jenny listens with empathy as the upset young woman tells her that the photographer got busy at the last minute, and because of that, she would need all the help she could get. They walk together and talk on the street, on their way to the cafe. The brown-haired young woman asks why Jenny is not excited for her first interview. Then she asks if the newcomer is afraid of dogs. Jenny, with a slightly sad look, replies that it was not that. Still shaken, she ends up remembering the latest events, lowers her head, and stays silent. They arrive at the establishment, and her colleague quickly asks her to take a photo of the facade so they can put it in the article. Jenny agrees to take the photos to help her colleague. Inside the cafe, there are several very cute dogs and different breeds from various parts of the world. Holding the camera, Jenny really thinks the dogs are very cute. While the brown-haired young woman talks about the interview with the establishment's owner, Jenny makes friends with the little dogs in the cafe. Suddenly, something catches our protagonist's attention, and she sees a brown poodle clearly very scared, growling and trembling in one direction. Worried about the little dog, Jenny apologizes in case she scared him. She tries to approach the small poodle to calm him down, thinking the camera might have caused that fear in him. Suddenly, paws walk in their direction. Then, Jenny turns to try to understand what was causing so much fear in the little dog, and she sees a large English Mastiff, staring at them threateningly while growling. Several chills run through our protagonist's body because of the imminent sense of danger. Slowly, Jenny stands up and begins to approach her colleague, calling her by her name, Miss Jade, finding it strange that there was an aggressive dog in a dog cafe. She finds herself in a dangerous position. The dog's gaze follows her as it growls threateningly. With a sudden lunge, the massive Mastiff attacks Jennifer, who screams in fear. Jenny falls to the ground after the dog grabs her arm, frightening everyone in the establishment, including her coworker. She calls Jennifer, but a cafe employee tries to stop her from intervening because of the great danger. The large animal does not seem to want to release the young woman's arm, despite her coworker's protests and cries for help, and the employee's shouts. Jade begs someone to do something, to get the animal off her newly arrived colleague. Suddenly, a male figure enters the premises, wearing designer shoes. Jenny resists and does not give in to the large dog's bite, trying to save her life. Suddenly, the huge canine lets go of her injured arm, and the young woman falls to the ground, stunned by the attack. Her coworker screams for her to wake up, while some employees look for something to keep the wound from worsening. In the background, other employees were already contacting medical services. After the Great Scare, Jenny began to lose consciousness. She found everything that had happened strange, but especially the fact that the dog, once rabid, was now terrified of something. The large English Mastiff whines and trembles in a corner of the cafe, while a figure in expensive shoes approaches Jenny. The young protagonist struggles not to faint at that very moment. At the same time, a man in a suit and tie begins to get closer to her. She closes her eyes and blacks out completely. Unconscious and severely injured, Jennifer hears several barks in the distance. She is very nervous and still does not seem to have processed very well the tragic situation that happened, but she is sure of one thing. When a monster appeared, that was when the dogs started barking. Our protagonist convinces herself that there are not many reasons for dogs to like the presence of monsters, especially after such cruel acts. Lost in her thoughts, she realizes that at some point the dogs started barking at her, as if they judged her presence threatening. The young woman questions whether Samuel did something to her, and because of that, now the animals are disturbed in her presence. She is absolutely certain that the fugitive intruder had ruined her life and her home. As if hearing the monster boy's last victim, she hears in her thoughts that his thirst for tragedy had infected her, and that she would be the next. Fortunately, Jenny opens her eyes and is safe. She is lying in a bed, in a hospital room, and smells disinfectant and notices the white walls. Jennifer finally seems to realize where she is. Hearing a familiar voice, her aunt approaches, calling the young woman's name, who feels sad for having made them worried. In tears, her aunt tells her how relieved she is, and reveals how worried the two of them were because she had taken so long to wake up. Jenny apologizes to them for making them worry, and her uncle says that at that time, work was not important, and that he would obviously be by her side while she was injured. The young woman tries to sit up in bed, but feels a searing pain in her arm, under her aunt's protests, telling her that she is still not well. Our protagonist then sees the bandages on her right arm, while hearing that her uncle had taken care of all the medical procedures and work bureaucracy. So now all Jenny had to do was rest. Jennifer takes advantage of being calmer and asks about her coworker, Jade. Her uncle tells her that she returned to the office as soon as they got there, and that the young woman deeply regretted everything that had happened, and especially for not being able to accompany Jenny when she was discharged from the hospital. In tears, the young woman begged 1,000 apologies and admitted to Jennifer's uncle that it had been she who took her to the cafe and that it was her fault she had been bitten, and that she had asked the old man to send the protagonist her apologies. Touching her forehead, Jenny tells her uncle that none of that had been Jade's fault, and her aunt, inconsolable about the whole situation, tells her that the one at fault in that situation was the dog's owner. So her uncle reveals that the young man kept making excuses that his dog would never bite anyone. Jenny smiles and asks her uncles to calm down. After all, she was fine and safe. Tired after the exhausting day, she thinks that the cause of that incident had not been the dog, but rather some evil reason connected to the monster boy who had been in her house so many times. Suddenly, she interrupts her thoughts and wonders what happened to the mysterious young man who had helped her. Jennifer sits up in the hospital bed and asks her uncle what happened to the man who appeared at the cafe. The old man replies that there really had been a man who had helped get Jenny away from the furious dog, but that he apparently had just happened to arrive and had saved her. Our protagonist would very much like to thank him personally. Shaking his head negatively, her uncle says that he had asked an employee if there was any way to repay him, but since he was a new customer, not much was known about him yet. Jenny laments the fact and tells her uncle that when her arm has recovered, she intends to go there to learn more about him. Secretly, Jennifer would like to meet him again. The protagonist and her uncle look at each other, lamenting what had happened, and Jenny promises herself that she would leave the hospital as soon as she recovered, because staying still made her feel like a lifeless doll. While the young woman was recovering, the English Mastiff's owner appeared, begging her forgiveness, regretting what had happened, and then she finally had news about the mysterious man who had helped her. The owner commented to her that besides the young man being very handsome, his dog started acting very strange around him. Jenny asks him, "Strange in what way?" The dog's owner goes on to say that at the arrival of the handsome young man, his huge mastiff began trembling as if terrified. He continues his story, saying that it is already strange that such a friendly dog attacked someone, and even more peculiar that the same dog suddenly tucked its tail between its legs. Jenny reflects, remembering the neighborhood dogs that started barking when the monster boy was near, but then their behavior changed, and the animals foamed at the mouth in fear. Then she begins to consider that possibly the young man who had saved her might be on a sunny afternoon. A white sedan speeds through the city streets. The elderly aunt, out of pure concern for Jenny, asks her if she would like to spend a few days with her uncles, since she still had difficulties moving around, but our protagonist politely refuses, not wanting to be a burden to her relative. Then, the lady asks her niece to call more often to send news. Jennifer gives in and accepts her aunt's proposal to call more often, but tells her that she had not been that badly injured. What a lie. Sad at the thought of her aunt being worried about her, Jenny recalls her mother's depression, caused by the early death of her father. In her final days, her mother lived a reclusive life, barely managing to feed herself and only waiting for her daughter to return home. Probably, her aunt worries that her niece might be experiencing the same thing, and that is why Jennifer does not want to show her weak side to her, since her uncles are the only family she has left. They arrive at the protagonist's house. Her aunt hands her a large package wrapped in brown cloth, and Jenny asks her what it was. Her aunt kindly had already prepared meals to help with the young woman's routine. Telling her that there were more meals ready, she asked the young woman to take the packages inside while she herself got the rest from the car's trunk. Jenny timidly thanks her aunt for her kindness. She walks into her house, remembering the difficult moments her mother lived through during her depression. Her uncles worried a lot that she might end up going down the same path. She opens the door of her house, carrying the food to the fridge. But still in the dim light, Jenny is able to see large male shoe prints in the hallway. She begins to smell an unfamiliar and repulsive odor, and she gets chills when she finally realizes she was not alone at home, causing immense fear to take over her. Samuel, sitting on Jenny's sofa, asks where she had been all this time. He asks the young woman why she had stayed away from home for so long. Annoyed, he asks her what she had been doing. Furious, Jennifer orders him to leave her house. The young man's eyes show his surprise at the girl's sudden change in attitude. Driven by anger, the young woman orders Samuel to get out and go somewhere she would not see him, outraged by his irresponsible behavior. The monster boy becomes furious with Jenny's responses and bares his sharp teeth in an expression of rage. He stops for a moment and seems to sniff something different in the air. Samuel then realizes that the young woman smelled of hospital disinfectants. Abruptly changing his posture, he tells her that she should have told him she was in the hospital, since humans fall ill as soon as they have free time. Firm in her decision, Jenny tells him not to change the subject and asks him if he did not hear her telling him to get out. Arrogant, he mockingly asks her if she would be capable of kicking him out if he refused to leave. She begins to get angrier, thinking he was acting as if the house belonged to him, and the monster boy asks how a human like her dares to treat him that way. Samuel stands up and sees Jenny's aunt at the front gate of the house, realizing that the other scent was from the lady. Jenny goes after him, telling him to mind his own business and that he does not have her permission to meet her. Turning to her, he smugly asks if Jennifer thought he would do something against the old woman. Jenny, frightened by the possible turn of that conversation, is paralyzed with fear. The young man then asks which side of the family she was from, since she was so important that Jenny was hiding her from him. In her thoughts, our protagonist is alarmed, afraid he might harm the old woman. Bravely, she says she will not tell him anything and yells at him to leave before she calls the police. Samuel does not react, disappointed that despite the violent lesson he had given her, she continues to be rude to him. Rudely, the young man bumps her shoulder and tells Jenny that if she wants him gone, she should send her aunt home immediately, and that they still had matters to discuss. Jennifer thinks furiously that she would not put her aunt's life in danger. She reaches for the doorknob. She abruptly opens the door and the old woman was already outside. The lady tells her with an affectionate smile that she will help her take the medication and then Jenny could go rest. She offers to help clean the house and prepare some meals for her niece. Our protagonist is very insecure with the situation caused by the monster boy. She clenches her fists tightly. Jennifer carefully holds her aunt's hands, telling her that she can manage alone, while the old woman protests that she needs help because of her injured arm, claiming that there is a lot of dust in the house since it had been closed for several days. Her aunt looks at her with immense concern. She firmly holds the lady's purse and reveals that she is saying this because she would like to spend some time alone. Then, taking the lady's bag, she asks her aunt to go home. Jennifer silently watches her aunt's white sedan drive away, aware of how hurt the lady was. The protagonist wonders what questions her aunt wanted to ask her, given the drastic change in her attitude. She closes the gate behind her, very shaken and with no energy to deal with her feelings or the recent events. With slightly trembling hands, she reaches for a pack of cigarettes hidden in her back pocket and lights a cigarette. Outraged at how naturally Samuel invades her house, mistreats her, and still dirties the entire floor with muddy shoes. She needs to get rid of him urgently. She enters the house, briefly feeling satisfied with the thought that her aunt is safe. Samuel hears the young woman telling him to leave, but ignores her requests and asks with a concerned air why she had ended up in the hospital. She takes another drag on her cigarette and asks him why she would tell him such a thing. He gives an ironic and malicious smile, saying that she is going too far and that he would probably leave soon. Hearing the monster's cynical laughter, Jenny then questions what was so funny about it and says that she did not intend to accompany him. Terrified, the young woman sees what she feared most come true, as she hears Samuel say that he found it hilarious that she had been bitten by a dog and hospitalized for it. She feels disgusted for having trusted that monster. She reaches for the bag her aunt had left there. In a moment of distraction, Samuel laughs at the absurd phrase he had just spoken. He suddenly opens his eyes and warns of something coming in her direction. Then, the lady's bag is thrown across the house and crashes loudly against the wall beside Sam. Furious with the man, Jenny throws in his face all of his dreadful actions, and that he had no shame, showing up after she had been gravely injured only to laugh at her. He is paralyzed by the girl's angry reaction. Screaming, Jennifer begs him to end her because she can no longer endure his manipulations and cruel behavior. He begins to advance toward her. Our protagonist is surprised by a sudden gesture. The monster boy's strong hand grabs the fragile neck of the protagonist, holding her firmly. Enraged, he demands that she beg for mercy, because if she does, he will pretend nothing was said. Also enraged, she says she will not beg for mercy from a useless monster like him, and that he should have left her house when she told him to. After being called useless, he loses his seriousness and begins to laugh cynically, saying that Jennifer had completely lost her mind. Then, violently, he lunges at Jenny, biting her neck, and the young woman, terrified, wonders if she will end up becoming a monster too. As she looks at him in terror, he tells her that he is a direct descendant of a noble family, and that now she should revere him as her master. Our protagonist then reveals to us that this story happened when she was still alive. Jenny's living room is completely overturned, coffee table toppled, books scattered on the floor, stains on the sofa and the carpet. A man with very refined shoes approaches the girl lying on the floor. Theodore observes the dreadful scene before him, and Mark, stunned, asks him what the two of them could do. Theodore replies that they must take the woman to the main family. They hide their identities in the hidden side of society, the other species. They possess superior strength, regeneration, and long life, attributes that are transmitted directly through their bloodlines. Their inherited abilities clearly set them apart from humans. They feed on blood, but can transform a human out of love, in a process called metamorphosis. The problem is that this transformation comes with terrible pain. Theodore, shaken by the girl's situation, wonders what his brother Samuel must have been thinking to have committed such cruelty. Metamorphosis is a precious alternative for those who cannot be together. But to have abandoned the young woman in that deplorable state, he takes her in his arms. The morning sun illuminates a sumptuous mansion. A man calls for Theodore, while he and Mark observe the girl lying in the large bed of the room. Theodore apologizes to the newcomer for having called him at such short notice, but he really had a very serious situation in his hands there. Considering that the girl had been found in a place with traces of Samuel, they judged that she might be his companion, and because of the young woman's state, Theodore, without showing signs of anger, had to summon the doctor immediately. The young brown-haired man, wearing glasses and a white coat, is Timothy Seo, the family's doctor, who confesses he never imagined Theodore would bite a woman. Mark, hearing that absurdity, cannot accept that the young man thought Theodore was capable of committing such a serious act, one that fit much more into Sam's responsibilities. Theodore, in his thoughts, knows that if that woman reaches any member of the Yu family, the political relations between the two clans will be brutally shaken. Timmy, observing the young woman's condition, analyzes that she seems to have been abandoned for some time, and that she must have had great willpower to have resisted until then. Our protagonist, with bandages on her neck, struggles to survive. Theodore asks if that was really the case, and Timmy affirms that it is a great surprise for all of them, but that if they take the right measures, the young woman may recover. Theodore, relieved, thanks the doctor for his answer. The young doctor goes on to say that metamorphosis is a painful process, one that alters the body's structure, and the purity of Theodore's lineage was a weighty factor in the young woman's agony. Mark, unable to speak up about the doctor's words, remains silent as he sees the older brother resolve the situation caused by the younger brother, who had basically been useless his whole life. While Theodore observes the unconscious young woman in his bed, Timothy asks him to go easy on her, at least at the beginning. Jennifer suffers from the consequences of the bite, and the doctor recommends that Theodore hold her gently, as if he were protecting her. Theodore nods silently, watching the young woman. The dark-haired young man thanks them for all the help and then dismisses his cousin, Mark, and the doctor, telling them that he will take care of the rest from then on. The young men leave the room, leaving them alone. Jennifer, lying in bed, breathes softly. Theodore removes his jacket. Pulling one of the blankets, he settles into the bed, moving closer to our protagonist. He lies down beside the girl with a sad and distant look, repeating the words spoken by the doctor. While Jenny trembles slightly, he gently pulls her closer. He embraces her, not really knowing if that gesture would help her, and thinks of the consequences suffered by humans who are bitten by his kind. Theodore, worried, pulls the fragile young woman closer, telling her that soon she will be fine. His gaze carries deep sadness, seeing the state in which she had been abandoned by his reckless brother, and he realizes how strong she is. In her thoughts, our protagonist runs desperately in a completely red world. She cannot hear anything around her. Unable to wake up, she flees, seeking a way out. Then, Jennifer hears voices, and in her nightmare, she is bitten on the neck by a black dog. She cries thick reddish tears as she hears a voice that will be by her side forever. The young woman's eyelids tremble slightly, and she begins to wake. Upon waking, Jenny finds herself facing a handsome man by her side, not knowing where she is. And the young man tells her that it is not what it looks like. Exhausted after the events, the young woman asks Theodore why she is there, and he observes her apprehensively, telling her that her body needs to be close to him in order to. Jennifer struggles in bed, overcome with agony caused by the pain of the bite. Theodore carefully takes her in his arms, asking her to calm down and telling her she is doing well, but our protagonist is overcome with chills and tells him that there is something strange in her. After having blacked out for so long, she does not know who the young man holding her is and realizes that even breathing feels very different. The dark-haired young man pulls the delicate girl closer, promising her that things will get better soon. Jenny, falling asleep again, feels her body like concrete, barely able to think. Hopeful, Theodore tells her that her breathing is much better and that he will be her caretaker during the metamorphosis. She briefly regains consciousness and gathers strength to ask him if he is a doctor. What does metamorphosis mean? Theodore then realizes that the act of metamorphosis provoked by his brother, Sam, was much more irresponsible than he had imagined, for the girl had been transformed without knowing what was really happening. He strokes the young woman's short hair and offers to answer all her questions when she is better. The man sits on the bed, and while she goes back to resting, he tells her that she needs his energy and that he will hold her hand, fearful that something might go wrong. He delicately holds Jenny's hands. She then turns to him and asks if it was he who saved her. He smiles sweetly at her. Losing consciousness again, she gathers her last strength to tell him that her name is Jennifer, and he asks her to rest and that tomorrow they will be able to talk. He gently squeezes the young woman's hand, telling her he will be there as soon as she wakes up. A man waits silently in the hallway. Something catches his attention, and he hears footsteps approaching. The noise is caused by fine, high-heeled shoes, accompanied by elegant legs stepping on the wooden floor. A refined woman with beautiful clothes, pink hair, and wine-colored eyes greets the man, calling him by his full name, Kyle Seo. The young man feels intimidated by her presence, for she is Miranda Seo, one of the most beautiful and threatening secretaries of a lower branch of the family. She asks the young man if he knew why she was there, and he begins to answer slowly. She places her hand on his shoulder in an intimidating manner. Getting closer to Kyle, the woman tells him that it was her duty to be there to know how the metamorphosis of that human who had just arrived was going, while he stares at her nervously. The inner clan refers to the branch that represents the women of the family, where the lady of the family resides. Not only are there very few representatives, but it is also a serious taboo to disrespect any of the women from that branch. And the power Miranda holds is far more than just that of a secretary. Kyle cannot oppose her, and the woman giggles, telling him how red he has become. Finally, someone arrives, drawing Miranda's attention, leaving Kyle relieved not to be alone with her anymore. Mark, the cousin we saw earlier in the narrative, appears in the hallway carrying a tray with fine wine and some slices of cheese, and the man tells the two that he was busy. Miranda, annoyed by the interruption, says that he looks just as irritated as any other day with that usual expression, and reminds him that she also has her duties. Kyle watches in astonishment as his brother, Mark, tells the young woman that if she has time to pester his brother, then she has time to organize the pile of documents at home. The young woman ponders for a moment, but then replies that if the human was already in the process of metamorphosis, soon she would be her responsibility. So, what harm would there be in checking on her before she woke up? Mark says there was no problem with that, since the only thing that could get worse would be the rumors. With a dark look, she says that Mark knew the right words to irritate people. Kyle is terrified by the change in Miranda's expression, and Mark resigns himself but disapproves of the secretary's insistent attitude. He sighs and finally allows her to accompany him into the room just that once. Mark turns to go to the master bedroom and tells Miranda that if she dares to bother the young woman, he will throw her out immediately. She huffs a little as she tosses her hair back and follows Mark. As he walks to the room, the man ponders that, despite Miranda's power and importance in the female lineage of the family, he would never allow her entry. However, he had no time to deal with her complaints, because due to Samuel's cruel irresponsibility, the clan leader, Theodore, was supervising the young woman's metamorphosis. Mark, worried about his leader, realizes that he had gone days without eating anything proper, while putting all his attention into caring for the girl. The man, furious in his thoughts, wonders how long Theodore will continue to take responsibility for cleaning up the messes caused by his younger brother. A scream echoes through the great hallway, leaving Mark and Miranda paralyzed, not quite understanding what was happening. He throws the tray for the secretary to hold and bursts into a run to find out if something had happened to the clan leader. Mark flings open the door of the master bedroom, asking Theodore if everything was all right. He is paralyzed again before what was happening in front of him. Theodore was holding Jennifer in his arms while the young woman trembled, shivering all over, emitting guttural sounds. In suffering, she throws her head back and begins to scream. Frightened, Miranda watches the horrific scene. She then realizes that Dr. Timothy had just arrived in the room. Tim, the young doctor, rushes through the room to provide aid and asks that they lay the woman on the floor so she can be examined urgently. Theodore, his cousin, asks if by any chance she had weakened, but the doctor replies that she is going through a complete transformation. But since Theodore was by her side, complications should not arise. Suddenly, Jenny begins to writhe in a macabre way, while Theodore carefully tries to restrain her. Terrified by the events, Miranda closes her eyes and turns her face. Worried, Dr. Timothy says that she must be in great pain, but Theodore, relieved, holds the girl in his arms and asks everyone to leave the room. With a look of concern, Theodore warns everyone that he will take care of the rest. Then, he places his hand over Jenny's abdomen, emanating a kind of channeled energy. Then, the girl's legs, that had been thrashing frenetically, calm down and relax. The young doctor observes the clear change in the young woman and is relieved that she was no longer agitated. Jennifer finally falls asleep in Theodore's arms, in a beautiful scene. Mark and Miranda are extremely embarrassed to witness that delicate moment. Kyle, who saw it all happen, is worried about the clan leader's well-being and timidly asks him to eat something. Theodore, while covering Jenny with a sheet, asks once again that they leave them alone so that she can rest well, but the others insist that he needs to eat. Timothy, resigned to the order of the clan leader, begins to leave. Mark takes the tray from Miranda's hands and once again asks Theodore to eat, since he too loses energy as Jenny's metamorphosis progresses. Theodore smiles sweetly. Holding a large goblet, he takes a generous sip of wine. Looking at the sleeping young woman, the dark-haired man asks them what Miranda was doing there. He strokes Jenny's head and tells them that he had not requested the secretary's presence there. After all, since when could a member of an inner branch enter the main chambers whenever they wanted? Disconcerted, Miranda begins to stammer. But Mark takes her side and explains to Theodore that after Jenny's metamorphosis, Secretary Miranda would be supervising her, and that she wanted to meet her and see how she was. Miranda is surprised to see Mark favoring her. Theodore, already exhausted, once again asks everyone to leave the master bedroom to focus on the young woman's recovery. Miranda, awkward, excuses herself, while the others were already leaving. They walk down a beautiful hallway. Miranda thanks Mark for his help at that moment, and he promptly replies that he was only repeating the young woman's words, which makes her regret saying thank you. Taking advantage of the moment alone, Miranda tells the young man that the clan leader must have fallen deeply in love with that woman, seeing the affection and care with which Theodore treated her. Miranda continues, saying how surprised she was, especially since she had never seen him make that expression, and that despite the delicate moment, he was being very attentive to the young woman. Finally, Miranda admits to feeling a little jealous of Jenny. Mark says there is no possibility that Theodore had fallen in love, and in his thoughts, he puts all the blame on Sam. An elegant bedroom is lit by the morning sunlight. Jenny continues the process of metamorphosis, sweating and clutching the bedsheet, and she remembers that during the fever peaks, she heard a song repeatedly in her head. It was the same song Samuel sang that afternoon. Our protagonist wonders if the monster boy would appear again. Wasn't it enough that he had torn her neck open? She opens her eyes when she hears a different voice asking if her consciousness was slowly returning. She turns to the mysterious man who was calling her, sitting in a sumptuous armchair. The dark-haired young man begins to stretch his hand toward her. The young woman, in a quick reflex, shrinks back in fear. However, to her surprise, he gently strokes her hair, which leaves Jenny confused. The young man, whose name she still did not know, says that her fever has gone down. He tenderly caresses the girl's hair as he says that he feels relieved that she is awake. It is the first time in a long while that our protagonist truly seems to feel calm. She reaches out to him, noticing how gentle his voice is, and touches the man's face, caressing his cheek, making him blush for a few moments, thinking about his melodious voice. Touching his face delicately, she finally realizes that this was not a dream. Timidly, he calls her by name, leaning closer. Jenny is swept by a rush of emotions and realizes she did not know what she was doing, making that physical contact with the man. Embarrassed, she apologizes and tells him that she acted without thinking, as she thought she was dreaming of a stranger at her side. Theodore, awkward, touches his own face and tells her that he thought she had been displeased with his stubble. Still dazed and not remembering anything after fainting, Jennifer asks him what place this was and who he was. He promptly explains that he brought her there right after she fainted. He sighs and tells her that her memory must be foggy because of the severe pain, but despite that, there was nothing she needed to worry about. Finally, he introduces himself to her, telling her that his name is Theodore Seo, and that she was now in his house, and that 10 days had passed since she was injured. Surprised, the young woman jumps up, sitting on the bed, shocked by how many days had passed since the accident. Sitting in his sumptuous armchair, Theodore confirms to her that she had been sick all this time, and then she also notices how much her hair had grown. Now, fully conscious, the young woman is alarmed, remembering her family, and that she should contact them as soon as possible. Theodore lightly touches her shoulder. He asks the young woman to calm down, as her uncle had already been informed, and that she should relax and take the opportunity to focus on recovering. Confused, she begins to ask him how. He makes a hand gesture, promptly apologizing, telling her that he had to take her phone to do it, and that he is sorry if that upset her. Theodore asks her to endure it while her treatment is finishing, and as he says this, he covers the young woman with the sheets again. She lies down in bed again, reflecting that the man really does not seem to have bad intentions. As he covers her, Theodore tells her that she must be hungry, and he offers to prepare a snack. He walks away from the bed while she watches him. Jennifer feels something strange, a feeling impossible to describe. His hand reaches the doorknob, and the young woman thinks about how her heart beats faster every time she sees him. She touches her heart, immersed in those new sensations. Before he leaves through the door, Jenny calls out to him, asking him to wait. Embarrassed, she says she is not hungry at that exact moment. He turns to her with a kind smile and asks if she is afraid of being alone. She tries to make up an excuse, her cheeks already quite red, and confesses to him that she doesn't know why she is acting that way. Before he leaves the room, she asks him who exactly he was. Looking at the young woman lying down, Theodore replies that he is Samuel's older brother. Jennifer remains silent, apparently absorbing the man's words. Without showing much reaction, she asks if Theodore would have a cigarette to give her. He immediately pulls a cigarette from the pack. He says yes and places a cigarette on the young woman's lips, adding that he hopes she doesn't mind the brand he smokes. Theodore lights it with a lighter and hopes she likes it. Taking a drag, Jenny thanks him for the courtesy. The young woman looks at him and notices that he is watching her surprised. The man answers that despite having cared for her for 10 days, he never expected that the first thing she would ask him when she woke up would be a cigarette. With a distant look as she smokes, Jenny asks him if at any point the idiot brother of his had asked Theodore to save her. Theodore simply replies that no, as he was looking for traces of Samuel and found her purely by chance. Without letting go of the cigarette, Jenny makes an expression of pain, and in her thoughts, she confirms her fears that the cruel monster boy had abandoned her to her own fate. Interrupting the young woman's negative thoughts, Theodore extends an ashtray and asks her if she would have liked Samuel to have asked for help. She apologizes to Theodore, telling him that she admits she knows it's no way to speak of someone's brother, but that she absolutely prefers that Sam had left. With a sad look, Theodore tells her that she has nothing to apologize for, and that all of this was his irresponsible brother's fault. In fact, he admits the one who should be apologizing was him. Jenny, resigned, tells Theodore that at that moment he might as well tell her the whole truth. The young woman, sitting on the bed, reveals to the man that she is afraid Samuel will return to cause her more harm, since he has no scruples, and that she would hate to have to forgive him in any way. Theodore gently touches the delicate young woman's face. Looking into her eyes, he assures her that such a situation will never happen. After all, as he had said before, he had taken her there with the intention of protecting her. Jennifer's eyes light up at Theodore's words. He continues to watch her, not hiding a faint red glow in his eyes. Someone flips through some pages on a clipboard. Theodore holds some papers while sitting next to Jenny on the bed. However, despite the young man's kind words, Jenny feels very uncomfortable being caught up in that situation. Theodore seems to be a very busy businessman with many duties, yet he does not leave her alone for a single moment. She admits she thought he was bluffing when he told her he would not leave her alone during the metamorphosis. In her thoughts, she realizes that somehow when he is not near, the pain returns and she begins to have anxiety attacks. Still lying down, she calls the man's attention, who was still distracted flipping through the clipboard. She reminds him that they had said her recovery would be complete in another 3 days and asks him if there isn't another way to recover faster. Then, Theodore asks her if she is asking that because she is uncomfortable with him. Continuing, he asks her if she would like him to put her in another room. Clearly embarrassed, Jenny tells him that the bed is uncomfortable, but he promptly replies saying that she can be honest. She tells him that he had said they needed to stay together, and he replies to her saying that because of that, he needs to periodically appear in her room. Quickly, Jennifer grabs his arm. Theodore tells her that at first he was worried to see someone so young and so fragile as she was, but apparently she knew how to be stronger than he had imagined. Then, with a sigh, she tells him that he speaks as if he were a very old person. He confesses to the young woman that he is much older than she imagines, and that he was the one who cared for Samuel during his childhood. Jennifer is shocked, imagining that someone as merciless as Samuel had the privilege of being raised by someone as kind as Theodore. Theodore continues and tells her that they must have an age difference of approximately 12 years, since his kind has a long life expectancy. He notices that Jenny is quite surprised by all that information. The young woman then reasons that the motive behind Samuel's personality would be, and Theodore answers her that the fault of it all was Samuel being too spoiled during his life. Deeply shaken, Jennifer listens to Theodore tell her that everything that had happened to her was his fault. He watches her attentively as the young woman tells him that thanks to him, her life had been saved by little. Theodore pulls the sheets to get out of bed and tells her that, inconvenient as it may be, it is the truth. While she thinks he must have some kind of secret plan, the man extends his hand to her. Politely, Theodore asks Jenny to take his hand so he can lead her to another room, and she notices the kindness with which she is treated. They walk through the corridor, and after 10 days lying in a bed, the young woman walks awkwardly, holding on to the man's arms. Despite the comfortable slippers, she walks with great difficulty. Leaning on Theodore's firm arms, Jenny realizes she can barely balance herself, and it feels as though she is not in her own body. The observant man asks her if she feels her movements as artificial, and then he tells her that she seemed to be thinking about that at that moment. The young woman then answers him that she didn't know his kind was capable of reading minds. He tells her that it sounds like something out of a movie, while she, mentally, thinks that the existence of beings like him and his clan was already an entire movie. However, he assures her that she doesn't need to worry about becoming like them, and that yes, her body would undergo a change to become stronger. She lets out a sigh and tells him that he is trying very hard to convince her of the advantages of becoming a monster. He says that supposedly he has to do that if a body with more years of life and good resistance to diseases is considered being a monster. But with Jenny, it was different. Firm in her words, she tells him that his brother had bitten her, and because of that, she had stopped being human. What else could she say to him? In her thoughts, Jenny assumes that if this so-called metamorphosis really were something good, Samuel would never have bitten her for no reason. He really had tried to end her life. Theodore looks at Jennifer and asks her to really trust him. The two stare at each other for a moment and Jenny feels her face blush. He leads her to a new room. Jenny thinks to herself that she shouldn't trust him, because he is the brother of the monster boy who transformed her. But despite that, she keeps getting involved with him and asks him if that is really the reason why he took care of her. Looking at the chambers, Theodore asks the young woman what she meant by that. She crosses her arms in a withdrawn posture and says that he brought her there to protect her, and that she was asking if it really was to do so. She asks the man how she could believe he wouldn't suddenly change his personality, just like his brother. He listens to those words attentively, with a mysterious expression. Jennifer, in sheer dread, hears Theodore tell her that now she is part of the clan, and since he is the leader of the family, nothing is more appropriate than for her to be cared for by him. Furthermore, he would like to apologize for Sam. The young woman's eyes widen at the man's words. She grows furious, throwing in his face that he knew what Samuel had done and that Theodore couldn't fix it by apologizing. As Jennifer shouts, she begins to feel a sharp pain in her neck. She starts to fall to the floor, and Theodore calls her by her name and tries to hold her, preventing her from falling. Jenny feels as if her neck had been cut in half, and Theodore tells her not to push too hard, since her recovery was not complete. He asks the young woman to hold onto his arm. Suddenly, Mark enters the chambers, worried about Theodore. With a wave of his hand, Theodore dismisses his cousin, asking him to leave the room while he holds Jenny in his arm. Theodore, devastated by the young woman's condition, asks her forgiveness several times. The young woman opens her mouth without being able to speak, as if searching for air. He pulls her closer and tells the young woman that from now on, she will only see him if she is in danger. Theodore makes a promise, while Jenny, mentally, considers this whole clan story something totally out of her reality. But all of this changes when that man touches her. And then, she thinks it would be much easier if he weren't so nice to her. Sometime later, Jenny is sitting on a wooden garden swing on a sunny day. Now, our protagonist is very different from before. Her big expressive eyes, long hair delicately blowing with the afternoon breeze set her apart from the shaken and sad young woman we met at the beginning of the story. Alone on the swing, the young woman admits she would never have imagined such a large garden in that house. She also thinks that the room she is staying in is far too big for one person. Jennifer wonders if Theodore had prepared all of that for her. She looks at her clean arms and notices there are no scars since her surgery. Looking at her delicate hands, she wonders if that is because of the metamorphosis. An unfamiliar place, an unfamiliar hand. After the metamorphosis, her whole body had changed. Jennifer feels like an entirely different person. As soon as she stabilized, Theodore had been removed from her care and taken by the secretaries to work. And that is how Jenny became the only person in that huge house. She holds some trash, relaxed, thinking that since Theodore had left, she might as well relax. However, her thoughts turn back to the man, and to when he cared for her when she still wasn't able to fully understand what had happened. Remembering the touch of his hand, Jenny realizes the kindness and compassion he showed affected her before she even noticed. Jennifer, holding the delicate white dress, realizes how much she wants to believe he really was a good person, and that he wouldn't drastically change personality. But at the same time, a cloud of doubt hovers over the young woman's thoughts. When she remembers his treacherous younger brother, Samuel, that bastard had completely changed Jenny's life. Just thinking that Theodore and Samuel are from the same family makes the young woman furious while also feeling fear. Subconsciously, she fears Theodore. She is awakened from her thoughts by a female voice, saying she seems to have recovered enough to be able to walk. Jenny wonders who that woman appearing in front of her was, since she thought she was alone in the big garden. Surprising her, Miranda gives a friendly smile. Miranda then asks her what she thought of the garden and introduces herself as part of the CO family. However, Jenny shows apprehension at the sudden appearance of the woman in front of her. Miranda looks at her, but now her smile becomes more mysterious. Jenny notices the change in the woman's expression and stays silent. The young woman with pink hair extends her hand to Jennifer, inviting our protagonist to come see her room, saying she would like to tell her many things. Miranda, with her hand extended, then tells her she thought it would take much longer for them to finally meet. Jenny, reluctant, accepts the woman's invitation, and mentally she resigns herself to doing whatever Miranda tells her, for now. They walk through the family mansion, and Miranda asks her how she is feeling. Jenny answers by saying she is feeling much better. The young woman confides that the first time she saw her, Jenny looked like she was on the verge of passing away. Jennifer then realizes that Miranda must have seen her while she was thrashing and screaming. Miranda admits it was her first time witnessing a metamorphosis, and now she already knew what to expect. Uncomfortable with the subject, Jenny finally understands why the woman had stared at her so much outside in the garden. Miranda presents her room to Jenny and says she is using it as an office and put effort into the interior design of the chambers. Jenny sees a beautiful room with white armchairs and many books on shelves. Our protagonist is impressed by the sumptuous quarters and wonders if everyone in the family clan is rich. Miranda invites her to sit and says she will bring her some coffee. Jenny sits in one of the white armchairs and asks Miranda what she would like to tell her. Pouring some coffee, Miranda says she simply wanted to cheer her up after all. A metamorphosis is not something that happens all the time. Miranda serves a cup of coffee to Jenny, asking her if she was surprised, but the young woman maintains her composure, saying that it was in the past and her duty was to figure out how she would live from now on. In her thoughts, Miranda notices that while many people would be freaking out, Jennifer remains quite calm about what happened. The elegant woman tells Jenny she is sorry she had been bitten by someone so reckless. Jenny at first doesn't realize who Miranda was referring to, but upon hearing the name Samuel, the young woman freezes while bringing the cup to her lips. Laughing gracefully, Miranda reveals to her that the clan has many negative adjectives for Samuel. Jenny sets her cup down on the table, repeating the name Samuel Seo, and tells Miranda that apparently everyone apologized for the cruel actions of the monster boy. Sad, Jenny then reflects that despite everything, Samuel probably didn't care at all about what he did. Awkwardly trying to change the subject, Miranda tells her that normally their kind is calm and gentle, with a few exceptions. Adopting a more welcoming posture, the elegant woman advises Jenny to forget everything Samuel told her. To help, she offers to clarify all her doubts and explain any subject that makes her curious. Jenny asks her what could possibly be clarified after everything that had happened. Miranda pulls a white card from her red wallet. She offers the card to the young woman on the other side of the table. Jennifer looks at the card and notices it is a lawyer's contact. Miranda smiles with a sweeter expression, asking if Jenny would trust her now. The two young women stare at each other in the beautiful chambers. Miranda breaks the silence, introducing herself to Jenny as the lawyer responsible for representing women, and that in the CO family there are 47 legal employees and 59 doctors. Confused, Jenny keeps looking at the card, wondering why she was telling her all of that. Jenny lets out a sigh as she hears Miranda continue her speech, saying that although she already knows this, they are a special kind who don't share the same common sense as humans. Out of nowhere, the young woman in the white dress is startled by a loud noise. Completely out of nowhere, Miranda pulls out a huge whiteboard, offering to teach everything about their kind. Miranda says Jennifer has much to learn about them. However, Jenny is still quite hesitant with so many new things. The woman tells Jenny to discard the idea that they eat humans just because their kind is different from normal people. Miranda continues, "Just like normal humans, we work to make a living. We are members of society with ordinary families." Jennifer thinks irritably that under other circumstances, that bastard who bit her could simply have been her next-door neighbor. Miranda continues her explanation, telling her that they are not cannibals or vampires. For example, Theodore CO, or president as he is called, manages the funds and works for a construction company doing financial services. And Jenny understands that he is the leader of that family. Then Jenny realizes that even Samuel CO had a normal job like other people. Miranda tells her he works at a company specializing in imports. He is responsible for bringing cosmetics, makeup, and perfumes into their country. In her thoughts, Jenny then understands that must have been why he had bought so many makeups and perfumes that time. Jennifer asks Miranda if the lecture is over, and Miranda turns to her completely offended, asking if it was boring, but the young woman replies that she just wanted to go home. Miranda ponders, realizing that although she had taken on a new life, the young woman doesn't have big questions, only resentment, and seems very uninterested, as if she didn't care about what had happened to her. Trying to cheer her up, Miranda says that yes, they will send her home, but only after she learns enough about them, so there won't be surprises in the future. Miranda gives her a black binder since Jennifer already seemed to be well adjusted to her new life. After the metamorphosis, she expected the young woman to still be quite scared, but she seemed calm and controlled, like someone who doesn't express much. Jenny gently accepts the binder handed over by the woman. When she opens it, she finds a white envelope and several business cards, mentally wondering what all that was. She pulls some bills of money out of the envelope, shocked at the amount in cash. Perplexed, Jenny asks Miranda if that money is some kind of compensation for the damages caused by Samuel. Miranda denies it and reveals to her that it is an emergency fund. Pointing to the binder, the woman tells her that all those cards are emergency contacts. Besides lawyers, there are doctors, police officers, various sectors. The woman goes on to say that their bodies have strong healing abilities and most wounds heal on their own. But since she was originally human, it might take a little longer. Thinking about it, Jenny recalls that indeed Samuel's wounds healed very quickly. Miranda continues her explanation, telling her that different types of wounds require different recovery times, and that is why the family had so many doctors in various specialties. Recalling Timothy, our protagonist realizes that they need many doctors to clean up the messes caused by the family members. Closing the newly acquired binder, Jenny remembers the night she met Samuel, thinking that if she had called the police, she would have been treated like a crazy person, and none of the proper measures would have been taken. With a shiver, she remembers the way Samuel said that maybe they would have even eliminated her. Miranda is surprised at how Jenny absorbs all the information very calmly and contained. Perhaps another person in the same situation would have already turned to the authorities and then agrees that there is no need to erase her memories. Jenny observes her silently. Having explained everything, the woman then welcomes Jenny. Now she is part of the clan, and now she knows that everyone is on her side. The young woman then replies that what she heard is that, as they all expected, she would be on their side. Pointing again to the binder, Miranda reiterates that all the people listed on those business cards are allies who are on her side. She finishes her speech by saying that because they are relatives, they don't receive money for their services. And Jenny agrees that it's all right. Miranda tells the young woman who was still sitting. Now she was part of that family. Isn't it obvious that all of us would help each other? Jenny reflects on the woman's words, especially family. After her father's passing, she hadn't received any kind of care or affection. And her closest relatives, who were her uncles, treated her with a lot of pity. Although the word family carries an affectionate meaning for the world, for our protagonist, it was a word that only brought her pain. Jenny asks if this help mentioned by Miranda was like the help Theodore had given her. She pondered Jenny's words for a moment. The woman, happy that Jenny had asked her the first question, tells her that Theodore seems like a dangerous man who sparks curiosity, doesn't he? Miranda explains to her that he is the head of the family clan, and that the house where they were belonged to him. Jenny, hesitant, asks the woman if there is some kind of family tree. Then, the woman points to a chart on the whiteboard with several family branches, saying that of course, the lineage of that family is over 1,000 years old. While Miranda explains to her that the head of the family protects the members, Jenny curiously associates the figure with a lion. Miranda continues to say that only the individual with the strongest direct lineage in the clan can become leader, like a monarch. That is why any command coming from the head of the clan is a priority. This is so serious that if this head ordered them to fight, their kind would eliminate each other until no one was left. Jenny blurts out that Theodore doesn't seem like the type of man who would give those commands. But Miranda warns our protagonist that he apparently is only gentle with Jenny, because if he wanted, Miranda herself would have already lost her head. Continuing, she says that in fact, on days when he is angry, he is capable of making clan members faint just with his own energy. Compared to other clan leaders, he is an extraordinarily strong man. Jenny is frightened by this information, shocked, and also amazed to learn that there are more of their kind. Miranda tells her that soon Jenny will be able to meet them. After all, they are everywhere. Proud of her informative lecture, Miranda ends the moment between the two, satisfied to have taught several new things to Jennifer. Smiling, Miranda admits she got ahead of herself and forgot to give Jenny the proper welcome. She listens in absolute awe as Miranda congratulates her for breaking free from the restrictions of being a common human and becoming part of our clan. Our protagonist's gaze reveals her sadness and insecurity about the future ahead of her. On a gray day, heavy clouds fill the sky. Theodore is silent, facing a large window in an office. Lost in his thoughts, he judges that it will soon rain again. As he sits at the table, his cousin Mark appears at his side. He reports that yesterday there was a fight between some young men and members of the Yu family. Although it was not serious, signs of vandalism were found. Theodore asks him what the Yu family's reaction was to that. While Theo lights a cigarette, Mark tells him they did not speak out. The head of the Seo family reflects that every day there is some conflict with the Yu family. The Seo family is restless because they have lost a successor, and meanwhile the Yu family is making a scene for the villain who brutally annihilated the only heiress. He lets out a sigh and asks Mark how Jennifer is. His cousin replies that she seems to be fine and had no severe reaction. Theodore tells him that she seems not to trust them. Mark is not sure about that statement. The man worries with the thought that the president might have fallen in love with the young woman. Mark asks Theodore if they would erase her memory if she refused to trust them. Theodore remains silent. Mark tells him that surely she must harbor some hostility towards them. According to Miranda, although Jenny listened to her obediently, there is no way to say if she will agree. Theodore knows that Jenny almost perished twice because of Samuel's actions, and unless she loves him madly, she probably despises him. Samuel was always a great womanizer, and although he showed no empathy for the opposite sex, many women were attracted to him because of his looks and free spirit. Even the heiress of the Yu family fell hopelessly in love with him and accepted the risk of marrying Sam. That human woman was probably no exception, for Samuel used her and then abandoned her. Right before the young woman's last moments, it was Theodore who had found her. In the man's thoughts, he judged that two men fighting over a woman was something worthy of a dramatic soap opera. For some reason, his heart is wounded. Suddenly, Theodore is shaken from his thoughts, for Mark was telling him that he thought it strange how much time Jenny had spent with Samuel. Doing some math, Mark tells him that if they counted from the date Sam made a large withdrawal of money, they had been together for at least a month. However, retracing the timeline since that terrible day, they could assume that Sam hadn't seen the girl for a month, but rather at least 3. Theo looks confused at Mark. Mark tells him his hypothesis, that the monster boy used her house as a hideout, since the residence was somewhat shabby and didn't match Sam's expensive tastes. He continues his reasoning, saying that no matter how bad Samuel's habits were with women, he wouldn't leave his traces with a random woman. Theodore asks Mark then if Jenny was special for having been with Sam, and that he could have forced her to the brink of going into the light twice. Mark tries to justify his argument, though he doesn't understand Sam's intentions. They had noticed that part of the money had been spent on women's clothes, perfumes, and makeup, which is unlike his profile. The two knew that, no matter the angle from which they looked at Samuel, he was irresponsible and apathetic, especially towards women. Besides hotels, he would never spend his money on human women. He is that type of guy. Theoretically, he would never spend fortunes on Jenny, and yet he did. Mark asks Theodore if Jennifer would then be a woman of the night with whom Samuel might have liked and started to get involved. Theodore becomes furious with Mark's audacity and gives him a threatening look. Immediately, Mark regrets having said such words, and remembers that infidelity is something unforgivable in the SEO family. Tense with the situation, Mark tries to fix his words by telling Theo that maybe they had a deeper relationship than they imagined. Theodore interrupts his cousin's speech, who is startled by the family leader's attitude. Already quite annoyed with that conversation, Theo tells Mark that, regardless of anything, if Jennifer refuses to trust them, the best option will be to erase her memories. Relieved after such an awkward moment, Mark lets out a big sigh. However, his thoughts are troubled, thinking that such an option would be a relief. But would Samuel stand still if they erased her memories? The moment he smells Theodore on the woman he was interested in, he will surely become furious. Not only did Jenny now carry Theodore's scent, but she also possessed his energy down to the essence. Mark reflects that until this happens, would the family leader be all right? Theodore, clearly shaken, wonders aloud when things began to go wrong. Although he was only his half-brother, Samuel was almost a son raised by him. Unlike his childhood, when Samuel was terrified of women, when he grew up, he became practically a predator of them. The number of women Samuel had dated was tiny compared to the number of girls with whom he had spent only one night and discarded right after. The idea of a womanizer settling down with a woman was definitely something all of their kind thought impossible. Even for the beautiful heiress of the Yu family, Samuel was a frightening figure. Nothing more can be said after her passing. Theodore jokes with the thought that they could have lived happily ever after the wedding. He recalls wanting to oppose the marriage of the two, but they seem to genuinely want the union very much, and Theo feels that he softened too easily with his brother. Then, another secretary, Cousin Kyle, interrupts Theodore's flow of bad memories and hesitantly informs him that the leader of the Yu family, Sebastian, is about to arrive. Theo silently exhales the smoke from his cigarette. Mark asks him the estimated time for Sebastian to appear there, while Theodore waits. Kyle replies that approximately in 10 minutes. Kyle informs them that the receptionist went out to receive him properly, and in his thoughts, the young man understands that it is a lot of pressure, and that Theodore must know how to handle that situation well. Mark turns to Theo and asks him if they should prepare, but the clan leader only replies that there is no need, since they still had an alliance. Theodore returns his thoughts to the tragic day when he lost his sister-in-law and nephew. Startled, Kyle listens to Theodore's proposal. They will offer as much gold as the weight of the lost heiress, in addition to the arboretum in the province and the consular village with hunting fields on Jeju Island, and will fully return the dowry. Irritated by his cousin's surprise, Mark looks at Kyle, indicating that he should stay quiet. Mark asks Theo what he intended to do if even this generous offer was not accepted, since the younger ones have been enraged for some time. Theodore simply replies that the members of the Yu family must be busy trying to contain the revolt of the young, and even they must not want a war in a country like that. Concerned with the leader's response, Mark says that if a war happened, the whole family would have to leave the country completely. Theodore, focused, smokes his cigarette in silence. Mark clenches his jaw and weighs the consequences of Samuel's irresponsibility, which above all places Theodore in delicate diplomatic situations with the other families. A beautiful house is surrounded by cherry trees full of blossoms as petals fly. Firm steps walk toward the house. The elegant Sora, receptionist of the Seo clan, wears traditional Korean attire as she greets Sebastian, leader of the Yu clan. Sebastian Yu, dressed in formal clothes, is accompanied by two huge bodyguards. Sebastian notes that they hadn't seen each other for some time, and the young woman nods. She is Sora Seo, responsible for receiving the guests of the Seo family, but don't be fooled by her appearance, for although she looks very young, she is a cunning artisan over 60 years old. Sebastian realizes that she is the spokesperson responsible for external affairs and for the formal reception of guests. There is no way someone like her could feel intimidated by the head of the Yu family. The Seo family had prepared an elegant room to receive the important guests. Sebastian sits on one of the sofas to wait. Then, shortly after, Theodore, Mark, and Kyle arrive in the room. Sebastian stares at them with an intimidating look. Sora takes advantage of the situation to serve tea to the men present in the room. The lady says with a gentle smile that it is chrysanthemum tea and hopes they like it. Sebastian takes a sip of the tea. Theodore follows in courtesy. Placing the cup back on the table, the man thanks Sebastian for coming to his home. Sebastian tells him that there were many discourtesies in the previous meeting, and Theodore calmly tells him that the council is always like that. Continuing, Sebastian tells him that he will ask him directly. Why had his presence been requested here? Theodore maintains a serious and calm expression. He turns to Mark and gives him a nod to hand him a black folder. Theodore gives the folder to Sebastian, who looks at it with some surprise. He opens the folder, contemplating its contents, and asks Theo if that is really golden property. Theodore begins his speech saying that what happened was a tragedy for both families, since for them, they lost a newborn, and for the Yu family, they lost an honored heiress. So the gravity of the situation weighs much more for them. Theodore says that he feels sad for the Yu heiress, because if it were not for Samuel, she could have lived a much longer and happier life. However, Sebastian throws back an uncomfortable question. Had Samuel not been unfaithful in his married life? Theo promptly replies that although he did indeed live a life of debauchery, his sister-in-law was truly happy with him. Stubborn and with his threatening golden eyes, Sebastian once again tries to confirm if Samuel had committed adultery. Pressing his hand on his knee, Theodore replies that no. Lifting his head, Sebastian tells Theodore that people say that women who marry the men of the SEO clan usually go insane, and asks him if that was the case. Theodore, tense, replies, yes. Kyle follows the dialogue very nervously and hears Sebastian state that since those things only happened in the SEO family, there must be some kind of blood problem with them. Mark speaks up, saying that statement had gone too far. Sebastian, irritated and with his arms crossed, counters Mark's words by arguing that for 3 generations of marriages, women end up in a state of insanity after giving birth, and such a fact cannot be mere coincidence. The atmosphere in the meeting room becomes dark and heavy, and the mood between the 2 men shifts from courtesy to danger. Sebastian says he was not sure if they would believe him. At that moment, Sora approaches them. Sora intervenes, telling the silver-haired man that the young heiress was truly happy, and that the incident had been a tragedy, not anyone's fault. The lady continues and tells him that the day before the incident, the 2 were tenderly waiting for the baby to be born. Kyle watches everything with a stunned expression. The young man reflects on how suffocated he felt by the 2 men who accompanied Sebastian, even though they had not even moved. The 2 men accompanying the leader of the Yu family are tall, strong, and display serious, focused facial expressions. At Mark's side, Kyle feels distressed because, as expected, he is still far too inexperienced to be the secretary of a direct descendant. Meanwhile, his cousin notices something crucial. The other leaders of the Yu family are there, and this is strange because apparently they never stayed away for so long. He wonders where Daniel Yu is. Drumming his fingers on a wooden surface, Sebastian expresses his persistent suspicions, since he and Theodore had opposed the marriage from the beginning. Theodore replies that the opposition was precisely because at that time he thought the 2 were not suitable for each other. Sebastian says that Theodore then admits he was against the union. Theodore argues that the tragedy had already happened, and that both families had suffered irreparable losses. And even if Sebastian did not believe it, after the incident, Samuel had been so shocked that he went mad. Threateningly, while showing his sharp teeth, one of the Yu clan members says that just because Samuel lost his mind, does that give him the right to go out with women everywhere? The Yu clan man continues to question Theodore, asking how he thought they would not discover Samuel going to several women's houses. Continuing with the accusations, the man tells Theo that Sam was going out with human women to avoid raising suspicion about his whereabouts. Sebastian raises his hand and asks Yuri to stop that talk. Theodore passes the word to Sebastian. Holding his own hands, Sebastian tells Theodore that he believes his words, aware that the man would not lie, but not Samuel. With resentment in his eyes, Sebastian says that Samuel is an irresponsible man who would lie in any situation just to save his own skin. He explains to Theodore that he trusts him and the SEO family, but not Sam. Theodore listens as Sebastian tells him that from that day on, Samuel would be actively hunted by the Yu family. Sebastian, changing the nuance of his voice to a threatening tone, tells Theodore that if there are no traces of Samuel, they will conclude this matter as a tragedy for both of them. But if that is not true, just as it happened with his sister, he will be annihilated by them. In her room, Jennifer hears the rain falling outside and feels discouraged, thinking that because of it, she will not be able to go to the garden. She looks at the rain falling through the window, thinking how she once liked rain and nowadays, not anymore. She remembers that she met Samuel on a rainy day when he invaded the attic of her house. Being honest, the young woman never really bought into that family story they tried to impose on her, because everything seemed much more like luxurious and protective confinement. She feared that at the slightest sign she wanted to escape, they would immediately capture her and do whatever they pleased with her. She sighs, thinking that somehow she needs to escape from that place. She notices something different in her room, a classic CD player. The young woman reaches out her hand to turn it on, hoping that some music could drown out the sound of the rain. She reaches for a small box with CDs, but notices that they are all exclusively jazz, with no other musical genre. Quite disappointed, Jenny realizes there is a clear musical preference in that house. She lightly shakes the CD box, resigned that this family had very old-fashioned tastes. Music fills the room as our protagonist looks at the raindrops on the window. The young woman remembers Theodore's words, asking her to trust him, but she cannot be sure if he is truly kind. She hugs herself, desolate, blaming herself for thinking about him because of the beautiful music that was playing. Jenny admits to herself that she wishes he would love her. After a few moments, she reclines in the chair and tells herself she needs to calm down. She realizes how much she wants a cigarette, but where could she find one? Jennifer has an idea. She walks through the sumptuous corridors of the mansion. She opens the door to Theodore's chambers, her thoughts constantly drifting back to him. Jenny is confused and thinks that metamorphosis must have scrambled her head. She slowly opens the door to Theo's quarters, which were slightly darkened. Looking inside, she notices he was not there. She begins to walk into the room and something unexpected takes hold of her. The young woman realizes that even in his absence, Theodore's scent lingers in the room, stirring her emotions. Jenny stops in the middle of the room, feeling her heart beat faster as she breathes in the scent he left there. She tries to compose herself and push thoughts of the man away. When she opens a drawer, she finds several packs neatly organized. The thought that he would hardly share those with her comforts her, and she rejoices at having managed to get one on her own. After getting what she wanted, she carefully closes the drawer, satisfied with herself. However, she truly hopes he does not notice that one of the packs is missing, since he apparently was an avid smoker. She begins to leave the chambers, all objects untouched in their places. As she leaves Theodore's room, Jenny wonders, why did they keep her there if she was completely alone? Jennifer lights a lighter to finally enjoy a cigarette. She exhales the smoke by her bedroom window. However, something does not sit well with her, and she feels strong discomfort and dizziness while smoking. She wonders if these symptoms occurred because of the metamorphosis. Our protagonist just wanted one day of peace. As she expected, what Theodore smoked was something quite strong. And while thinking this, Jenny takes another drag on the cigarette. Then she begins to recall Theodore's gentle hands. Smelling the cigarette, Theodore's figure materializes before her, startling her. He touches her lips gently, wishing that the cigarettes were to her taste. Haunted by the sudden memory, she wakes from the vision she just had. Immediately, she tosses the extinguished cigarette out the window. Leaning against the frame of the large window, she does not know if she is going insane or if she is falling in love with Theodore. Elsewhere, we see Theodore sitting in front of a small table, serving himself some coffee. In front of him, a mysterious voice tells him it had been a long time since they last saw each other. Theodore, with a slightly distant expression, confirms that yes. He toys with a cigarette between his fingers, while listening to the woman tell him that maybe it was the rain, but that house was starting to feel lively again. An elegant woman sitting in one of the armchairs asks Theodore if it has been 4 years since they last met. Theodore nods and tells her that he heard she spent some time at a summer retreat, but she apparently had not tanned at all. The woman looks at him seductively, asking him if she is still worthy of glances. But to Theodore, that question seems laced with a malicious tone. The man remains silent while he seems to sense a strange atmosphere. Then, he strengthens his posture and tells the woman to stop that. And she, surprised, immediately asks him, "Stop what?" Theodore tells her to stop seducing humans with the power of their species, while she replies that he is still such a boring man. Then, looking at the woman in front of him, he also asks her to stop the small talk and tell him what she came there to do. It was Theo's mother. In our story, the families that make up the species are very proud of their pure blood, and thus, each one has an animal that represents them. The wolf for the Yu family, the lion for the Seo family, the deer for the Jung family. Logically, the deer was not chosen for its fragility, but rather for its elegance. This family had a colder nature than the others. Theodore's mother told him that now he looked more like her family. She is Emily Jung, a direct descendant of the Jung clan, and the biological mother of Theodore Seo. Uncomfortable with her words, Theodore says she must be joking, but she replies that he must remember the leader of the Jung family from the previous generation and how the two of them were similar, both tall, handsome, and delicate, but still reclusive with blood and iron. Pointing at Theodore, his mother tells him that his broad shoulders and stature even remind her of her older brother, the current leader of the Jung family. He finally asks her what she meant by that. As she serves herself another cup of coffee, his mother tells him that he is incapable of reaching an agreement and has an obsession with never giving up after a bite. Looking at her son, she tells him that there is no one like him in the Seo family. He crushes the cigarette in his hand, wondering to himself who he might resemble. Besides, what his mother expects of him is similar to the fundamental nature of everyone in that species. The impulse to humiliate and trample their opponents, because all that species has is rationality, but its essence is stained with cruelty. The impulse of a wild animal. If not for this, even Theodore's grandfather would have been poisoned by his own son. Theodore, very bothered by the course of that conversation, wonders why his mother is bringing up that subject right now. She seems not to care about her own terrible words and drinks a little more coffee. Theodore tells her firmly that there is no possibility of him resembling members of the Jung family. Emily then replies that it is possible to see the resemblance if she compared him to that stupid son. Theodore says it is clear she still detests Samuel. His mother gives an indecipherable smile. Arrogantly, she reveals how Samuel is the spitting image of his father. Irresponsible, narcissistic, with nothing in his head. He is an idiot who only understands impulsiveness. Theodore had long been growing annoyed with that conversation. Quite snobbishly, his mother tells him she heard he got into big trouble because of Samuel, and that maybe it was her chance to try to cheer him up. He notices the change in the woman's eyes. His mother displays a serious, piercing gaze. Then, seeking a way out of that situation, Theodore rejects her attempt to cheer him up, and she laughs arrogantly, saying that it is indeed not easy to take care of a child. He thinks sadly that she usually acts that way, as if she expected him to be thrown into a bottomless pit if a single strand of her hair were touched. Using the power of their species on purpose to seduce and to comment on the young family's bloodline seemed more like tests for Theodore. Perhaps it was a form of vengeance for what happened on the day she gave birth, when she bit her own arm to avoid succumbing to madness and thus save his life. Or perhaps on that fateful day she truly had gone mad. Impatient, Theodore asks his mother once again what she came there to do, and she angrily asks him if that is any way to treat his mother, answering her like that, almost telling her to leave. Annoyed, he tells her she is not the kind of person who would stop by just to see him on a mere impulse. Suddenly, his mother tells him she heard he has a girlfriend now, which leaves Theodore completely unsettled. Suspiciously, she tells him she heard she was a human he himself had transformed. Worried, he wonders how such false information could have leaked, and especially how it could have reached the Young family. Pointing a finger at Theodore, his mother tells him that no matter how much the family controls their tongues, how could he think anyone would be able to stop a mother from knowing her daughter-in-law? They even told her things she had not asked simply because they were terrified. Interrupting something Theodore was about to say, his mother, in an imposing manner, says that for all those reasons, he should introduce his new companion to her. Tense with the course of the conversation, he tells her that the woman is someone for whom he is responsible, and there is no logical reason for him to introduce them. Now, a new woman was before him. Completely enraged and with a malicious look, Amélie stares at her son, practically growling the words that he was answering his own mother with flimsy excuses, and asked if he knew what metamorphosis meant for their species. Theodore remains firm despite the drastic change in his mother, telling her that he is the guardian of that young woman, and if anything tragic were to happen between the two of them, he would be forced to erase her memories. Returning to normal, his mother is shocked at the possibility of her son erasing the memories of the young woman he was protecting. She hesitantly asks him if he was not interested in having a child. Coughing discreetly, Theodore tells her that even if she completes the metamorphosis, she is still human, and she would hardly be accepted as one of them. Disappointed with her son's words, she says that he must have no idea of the joys of living a romance. Theodore only responds to her that he has no interest in those things, and she tells him that the young ones in the Seo family are often disorderly, representing nothing but chaos and madness. She takes a sip of coffee while Theodore assimilates that madness is something inherited directly through the bloodline, at once a blessing and a curse. Lost in his thoughts, Theodore knows that the Young family's lineage is suppressing her desires now, but no one has any idea how long that can last. With cruelty in her tone, his mother asks him if he intended to keep that young woman and hold her forever, correct? After binding her so tightly she couldn't do anything else? You probably would have made her into a doll that only looked at you. She continues her explanation that their species would never be able to rid themselves of destructive impulses since they were wild-born that way. Amélie Young approaches Theodore frighteningly, asking if he had already done something similar to that young woman. Without losing his composure, he tells her that she is wrong. Now, with strength in his voice and imposing himself as a man, Theodore tells her that not only is he the leader of the clan, he is the direct heir of the Seo family, with no reason to commit such acts behind her back, especially actions he would never agree with. His mother, enraged, makes her own black aura of anger calm down. With pure cynicism, she tells him that this is not enough. After all, giving dating advice to a grown son is absolutely unacceptable. Exhausted after so much family drama, Theodore thinks that, despite her being his mother, he has no idea how to interpret her. With a tired expression, he goes back to listening to Amélie's words. Then, in yet another abrupt change of attitude, she reveals to him that she was considering arranging a marriage for him, almost making him spill his coffee. Theodore coughs after choking on the hot drink and asks her who would possibly accept such an arrangement. His mother tells him it is a proper wife for a man like him, and we see a woman walking in elegant high heels, wearing a long red dress. Her eyes are golden and her hair is beautiful and blonde. It is Camille, Jim's younger sister. And that's it for today, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the story. So tell me, should Jenny really trust Theodore? Or is she falling into another trap from this mysterious clan? If it were you, would you embrace this new life? Or run away no matter what? Tell me your theories and opinions in the comments. This work is called Fly Me to the Moon, and our recap went up to chapter 21. And if you want more, don't forget to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss any new content. Kisses and see you next time.